Hey, it's 6 o'clock. All right, good evening and welcome. It is 6 o'clock, Wednesday, September 2nd. This is the regular meeting of the Truckee-Donner Public Utility District. Shauna, could we have roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Director Liliotis?
Here.
Director Ellis?
Here.
Director Aguirre?
Here.
Vice President Finn? Here. President Hunter?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call. Okay, deferring the pledge, and then GM, CEO Rem. Any changes?
We have no changes for this evening's agenda.
Got it. Okay, item number 5, public input. Is there any public input not on the agenda tonight?
No, Mr. President, I don't show any public input.
Great. Okay, now director update. Tony, since you're remote, I'll ask you first. Do you have any updates?
No updates. Thanks, Jeff. Good to see everyone, even though you're wearing masks.
Right. I'm going to go back and forth. Mask, no mask. We are very well separated. I'm going to say 7 to 8
We don't need
feet.
masks because we're more than 6 feet apart.
Okay, director update. Director Finn, VP Finn.
Perfect. I do have an update. It's actually been a busy couple of weeks for me. I attended most of the UAMP annual conference, which was virtual this year, which enabled me to attend with absolutely no, should I be doing this or not? You know, I went. It was great. I did miss the first hour of the first day, which I was the most interested in seeing, because I forgot it was on Mountain Time. But I bet Joe can fill in that little gap for me. Super interesting. I like how they really, there's a lot of different things that they discussed. After that, I attended a Special District West seminar that was special districts throughout the West, not just utility districts, but, you know, libraries and transportation, because we're all dealing with the same sorts of problems. So I listened in on that for a couple hours. Again, very interesting and very helpful to see what other special districts are doing. And then I took a literal tour of the Tahoe Truckee Sanitation Agency, which made me grateful to be here at the TDPUD at the beginning of that water cycle. So one thing that was really consistent throughout all of these events and seminars and conferences was the importance of communication and how important it is to have clear, open, honest communication on so many different levels. So within the organization, between the organization and our constituents, between our organization and other sister organizations in the region, and how important it is that we all stay connected to each other and what's going on, and so we can be responsive. It's so important for us to keep reaching out and sharing our stories, highlighting our great employees here at the PUD, highlighting our safety record, highlighting the stewardship of the environment, all of the ways that we give back to our community beyond providing safe and reliable electricity and water. And through that process, we earn their trust. And once we have that, which I think we do, but we can continue to add more value to our community and be in a position to listen to what our constituents want, and to figure out how to best give it to them. And again, that was an overarching, through all of these hours of conferences and touring, that was the message that I took away. So, so great. I'm happy to be back here. I'm happy to keep my lines of communication open. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Joe.
I have nothing to add
Got it.
for the betterment of the board yet.
Okay, good to see you. Bob?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Thank you. Good to see you. I do have an update. Ram and I, the last maybe 4 to 6 weeks, went around and met with other agency heads and really had excellent communication. So there we are. Just to kick that off on the right foot, and we had excellent meetings, and really looking forward to collaborate with our other agencies and continue that collaboration and grow those relationships. really excited for that. So that's,
So Jeff, you went together and?
we socially distanced.
You,
and-
no, but I mean, that was neat.
Yeah, yeah, so we met with, North Star Agency and Fire District, the town,
And district.
sanitary district,
Good.
correct. And then the watershed council, that fell apart due to my schedule.
We're rescheduling.
We're rescheduling, so. Yep, all good on that. Okay, that takes us to the GM update, CEO update.
Thank you, President Pender. It's my pleasure to update the board, staff, and the public that are present. Today, so for the month of August, our groundwater production was at 200.3 million gallons. This is up 7 million gallons increase year over year for the month. We had a very warm month in August, as you know, and so this accounts for a lot of that, which did push our conservation number down. So over the 2013 number, we only experienced an 8% conservation, which is what we saw in the data. So through the heat wave, you guys, we were pumping essentially for the first few hours of the morning, essentially from 5:30 to 11:30, at about 10,000 gallons a minute. So clearly, the community was using it at that point. And this is the first time we have seen a single-digit conservation number this early in the fall. So normally we're still in the teens. We don't get these single digits till the September timeframe when we're still seeing some heat and things are drying out. So I don't know what that means, but definitely staff is watching that.
What time of day was that?
So in the morning, Joe, we start pumping we bring on the system to make up roughly around 5 or 5:30.
Oh.
And in general, it'll be, don't quote me, but it's going to be about 6,000 to 9,000 gallons a minute. We saw prolonged pumping as we were trying to catch up with the folks as they were coming on. So normally we're done right around 9:30 as we fill up the tanks, and then we ride on tankage for the majority of the day. We didn't get to full until about 11:30, 12 o'clock, which shows that the demand was significant on the system during those two very hot weeks. On the electric side, remember I'm a month behind on electric. So July power deliveries to the district were 13.4 megawatt hours delivered. This is a 0.74 megawatt hour increase year over year for the month. So again, we're seeing greater demand because of the heat, I think. Our RPS for the month was 71%. It fell off a little bit only because our primary, the difference in the RPS was due to the Stampede Powerhouse was out for service, so we didn't have access to that renewable source. So it was a mechanical thing, not so the number would have been higher had we had that generator available to us. This is an 8% increase in RPS year over year for the month, so also outstanding. We had a number of outages in the system. We had a contractor bore into some lines by accident. We had a critter problem, and we had a couple, we'll call them power supplier issues. This is being exacerbated a little bit by our single shot mode, which everybody is aware of. But we're working together with energy staff to try to start thinking about how to more elegantly operate single shot. Really focused right now on what we call Truckee 4, which is our main corridor circuit, so that we can keep the business core in service even during an outage. With regards to the financial health of the organization, we are at our past dues over 90 are at $236,074. This represents a 1.4% of our March through July billings, so not significant. It is showing that those folks that were in our 60 days have moved about $20,000 has migrated into our over 90. We'll recover that. I'm not really that concerned about it, and really about taking care of our community and making sure that the impacts of COVID are dampened. We're not in hot pursuit. Remember that 500,000 equals 1.2% of our budget, so we're at the 0.6%, so not a lot. Our COVID relief fund, we currently have 214 customers in the program, and they've utilized roughly $71,000 of the 200 and something thousand that we put in. So it's doing well, it's healthy, and if there are folks that need it, and if people are watching this evening, please avail themselves of that. On our customer service exit study, that was a survey that we talked about last time we met, 87% of the respondents are very or extremely satisfied with their experience with the district, which is right on par with where we were. 72% responded that the call took shorter than expected, so that's also very good. The one that I want to highlight this evening is 92% responded that their issue was completely resolved. That is up significantly, but it shows that the customer service staff is doing a great job, and that our new CFO and his staff are hitting the nail on the head as we move forward. With regard to meetings, met with Nevada County LAFCO on Friday to start opening the conversation with them about when our SOI, our Sphere of Influence project, would start to move forward. That'll happen in 2021 or 2022 at this time. And start talking about services that we're delivering or can deliver or should be delivering, and just to try to de-ice that relationship a little bit. And I can say that it was productive. And we're excited about furthering that relationship and starting to develop some headway there. Met with CAT, with Contractors Association of Truckee and Tahoe. That also went very well. I understand a few of you also met with them. We had our Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency meeting. That continues to move forward. We're going to be doing strategic planning with them in October. So really talking about leveraging that agency for us here at the district, but also for the other members, and then the community further on. NCPA Commission meeting went very well. Talked a lot about their activities at one of their geothermal plants, and then we had a couple of closed session items that need to be resolved. PCWA's District 5 meeting, this is so Josh Alpine, who is our District 5 representative at Placer County Water Agency, convenes a meeting with North Star, us, Squaw Valley, PSD, and a few others to talk about how PCWA can help up in our region. I think that went really well. It did lead us into looking for a little bit of grant money from their annual Little Fork project monies. And so Mr. Poncellet put together a couple projects for us to give to them to see if we can get a little bit of grant money for some Martis Valley groundwater basin projects. And then also we had a really good meeting with Kevin over at the Truckee Tahoe Airport District, and talked a little bit about renewables with him. Also talked a little bit about bringing fiber to his organization and trying to build a fiber ring for him. Initiatives. So the COVID response here at the district continues to move forward as the landscape does shift a little bit under our feet a little bit as we're moving along, but we do not have any cases here at the district, but we continue to work with our protocol, and it seems to be working. And so we're doing really well. We did pull staff. We were very concerned about the return of our staff's students to the academic environment and how the district could help them and support them in that process. And so we did put out a survey, found that there were a few families here at the district that do need some support, but not enough in general to create a programmatic response. And so we're taking them on one at a time as conditions, as needs move forward. I did meet with Aqua's board, groundwater and energy committees. Some really good stuff there. One takeaway on the energy committee is the CPUC is really looking at energy storage as their solution for green energy in the state of California. We're really not sure how they're going to develop the thousands of megawatts that are going to be required, but for us to be aware that storage, whatever that means, is really kind of is where the state's putting their chips. And so there may be opportunities for the district in terms of funding and partnerships to help expand in there. Strategic planning, this evening we'll be addressing that, but suffice to say that staff has completed its landscape work in preparation for the board, as well as our initial SWOT analysis, so that we can start the workshops with the board and then move on to the greater community so that we can have everybody's input in our final thoughts. On the renewable energy front, we are preparing to update the district's 2014 greenhouse gas emissions assessment that was conducted with Sierra Business Council. So as soon as Steve Frisch and his crew have moved a few things off of their plate, they'll come in and update ours so we know where our position is now, and then we can start to report and improve that. Met with the town of Truckee to talk about the fueling station. We are going to work with them to develop a diesel project so that we're not using intermittent local private fuel opportunities, and that we have a bank of diesel available to us. Both entities are looking at renewable diesel, which has a carbon reduction between 63% and 87 or 88%. So a significant increase in terms of our greenhouse gas and reducing carbon usage here at the district. Water operations, we're working to move water operations to a renewable position. So we're working with Sonoma Water to develop a carbon-free source. They have achieved this, so they're helping us find our way in that accounting. And then we also joined the Water Energy Nexus Registry. They will help us account for the carbon and balance the carbon against our operations. So it's essentially a third-party entity that will validate our carbon-free operation. On the broadband front, I recognize that everybody in this community is struggling, and if you're on the call, I'm sorry. We have reached out, or reaching out to the school district currently. I have a meeting with the superintendent and staff to discuss how we can help them not only with their student population and making them more efficient, but also to develop a fiber ring for their assets so that they can talk amongst their facilities quicker at the gig speed. So staff's working on that. And then we're contacting other local districts and governmental organizations to enhance their business connectivity as well. We are hearing the community's need to move into this space. And knowing that the board moved into this space a few years ago, and that we are currently working with Plymouth Sierra Telecom to deliver a certain amount of service, this conversation is going to evolve here at the district. And so we're preparing to bring you more information and more plans, and to try to talk to the community about their wants and needs. With regard to some legislation that has come up, AB 6, which gave the California Attorney General tremendous powers over water, was defeated, and we worked, I can say that kudos to Mr. Poncelet, worked hammer and tong with our compatriot organizations, and were able to keep the bill from being passed. This is a fantastic outcome for the district. The other one was in CEC rulemaking. CEC is trying to to take away local control over long-term contracts for the district or districts. And so we've been able to speak into the CEC's meetings and talk about, through CMUA and NCPA, about why local control is the most important. We know what we need. We know the contracts. We've negotiated them. We're doing a good job. Let us do our job, as opposed to having Sacramento make those decisions. So he was instrumental in both of those, and I will forward the CEC letter to the board. On projects, the district-wide projects, we continue to work on our CIP plan, something we'll discuss this evening. Grace Crossing CFD is moving forward. The partner owners of the cottage parcel D and parcel F, have spoken with us and are working together to put together a term sheet to bring to us that I will review and then bring to the board. We'll try to find some kind of solution for them so that they can at some point start to help those parcels move forward. On water, this evening you'll be reviewing rates. On the water meter replacement project, we continue to move forward. Tank site piping modification project, we're still in that October timeframe in terms of delivery. And then the Red Hill tank, thank you, board, for approving the amendment. That project is moving forward. They have started to do the dirt work, and we should have a tank shortly. On the electric side, Northwoods Boulevard main line circuit rebuild. This was 24 poles up Northwoods, approximately a mile, and we increased the gauge wire on the poles. That project is complete. We did this with in-house staff, and so it'll be interesting for me to go back and review the project, see how we do, at a private sector versus public sector level. But kudos to the guys in the field; they were able to execute the project. Pole replacement project. We are now at 64 poles. This is 4 4 more poles than we had anticipated for the year, and we continue to thunder along with the months that we have in remnant. Current limiting fuse, the replacement project, so these, we're changing our fusing. These are better. They don't spit hot molten metal and gas. Getting the fuses is a little bit more difficult. They are more expensive, but it's a safer, better operation. We're moving forward on that project. And then the control house for the Truckee substation, because we're moving to the substation and upgrading them. We won't get to the Truckee substation this year, but we are taking delivery of the control house. We'll have that at the Martis Valley substation through the winter, and then we'll mobilize it next season. On veg management, this evening you will see an item where we will be asking to increase that contract so that we can, while we have good weather, we can increase the good work that we're doing. But Right to Tree Service is continuing to do that. And then the work at the Caltrans right-of-way, which we have been stumbling over to get accomplished. We have the approvals, we're on track, and we'll have that done shortly. Getting thumbs up from the other side of the room, so I'm saying the right thing. So just a quick important information item. NV Energy has a planned outage. I'm going to read this because I can't read this one. So NV Energy has a planned outage Tuesday, September the 8th through Saturday, September the 12th at their California substation located near the state line in Verdad, California. This includes an outage of the 120 kilovolt transmission line 101 that feeds power from Nevada to the North Tahoe area, including Truckee, North Star, Squaw Valley. Let's start calling that Olympic. Okay, Olympic Valley, Kings Beach, Tahoe City, and all the north all the way up to Portola. Okay, this is why this is important. So what this means is that Truckee and others that are served will be completely by CAISO and PG&E across the summit during this time frame. That means that if PG&E proceeds with a PSPS for the transmission lines crossing the summit during this time frame, then Truckee and everyone else on the subject will be subject to PSPS. We'll be reaching out to NV Energy to try to postpone this work and push it outside of our fire season, and we'll keep everybody updated. This is just it's a remnant of a past practice on a maintenance that's causing a hitch in our giddy up. It may mean nothing in that no PSPS occurs, but it may mean something.
What were those dates again? I'm sorry.
So from the 8th to the 12th, so for 4 days, yeah.
Okay.
So for 4 days, we're going to be in a window where we could PSPS.
We won't be getting that power from the north then.
We will not. We'll be taking power over the summit from PG.
Those guys let us do that? PG&E let us do that?
Well, somebody
For 4 days.
yeah, for 4 days. Let's just hope that they do it for the whole 4 days, right? You know, Joe, it demonstrates that and we all know that we can take power from that side. It's just more expensive.
Yeah.
And so as we're moving along, if there are renewable resources on that side and we can bring them in on a price point that is in battle against our Nevada side deliveries, we're in the catbird seat, right?
I kind of like this one.
This one's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'd say it's really good. So it's a hard deal to beat.
Yeah, it is.
And then lastly, Mr. Chair, I would request that the board establish an ad hoc committee to re-engage our broadband service delivery concept.
No, we cannot discuss that right now. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Where is that one showing up in the?
It is not, so
Okay.
you and I will work to set up that committee.
Okay, yeah. Right. Steve, just clarifying only, right, Council Gross?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. Clarifying questions, direction for a future agenda item are all fair game, but substantive discussion should not take place on the item.
Okay. Yeah, so I would be then for a future agenda.
Well, we don't need to agendize it. We'll just assign the ad hoc committee and then we'll notify.
Okay, perfect.
So with that completes my update. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Are there any clarifying questions?
I just want to thank you that's a lot of information. I always look forward to reading them when you said them. It sinks into my brain better. But I do appreciate all of the updates and all of the position right now that we're in. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well, I mean, I just want to make a comment. I mean, I'm glad that this year our RPS is higher than it was a year ago.
For sure.
You know, even though, you know, we had an issue there.
Yeah.
That's great.
It was, and then Director Ellis, that in some ways, it has a certain amount of resiliency already embedded within it, right? Even with a significant higher power asset in a maintenance mode, we're still able to achieve 71% renewable. That's significant.
Great, thank you. Consent tonight, we have items 8, 9, and 10. I have a question for Steve Gross regarding number 10. Foreclosures in Grays and Old Greenwood. Just being the residents of Grays, do I need to recuse on number 10, Steve?
Yes, I would recommend that you do recuse. These foreclosures obviously don't include your properties, but they affect the overall health of the CFD, which your property is part of and you pay into. So I do recommend that you make the disclosure about your real property interest and suggest then that you leave the room for discussion and action.
Okay, got it. So if we could, is there a motion for items 8 and 9, and then I will step out for number 10 due to a real property conflict interest?
I'm sorry, Mr. President. Mr. President, this item is on the consent calendar, so you can disclose your conflict with sufficient detail by disclosing your real property interest and indicate that you will recuse yourself from voting on that matter. And then when a motion comes to adopt the consent calendar, you can vote on it, and the district clerk will record your vote for the items 8 and 9 and as a recusal for item 10. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent calendar.
Okay,
I'll second that motion.
okay, and then Shauna, roll call, please.
Thank you. Director Liliotis,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Director Aguirre,
Yes.
Vice President Fenn,
Yes.
President Bender.
And then I'm yes with a recusal on 10 due to a real financial interest.
Did you ask for public input on that?
And then is there any public input on the consent calendar?
Mr. President, there is no public input.
Okay, saved by the bell. No. Thank you, Bob. Okay, so we have our first action item tonight, number 11, reallocation of electricity purchase funds, and we have Joe.
Well, good evening, President Bender and members of the board. Tonight is action item number 11. Let me share my screen. And I do have a fairly lengthy presentation, so please feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. Okay. So at the end of the first half of this fiscal year, the district has spent about $5.7 million, or just 89% of the anticipated purchase power budget. This is the result of lower than expected purchase power costs due to market conditions within our UAMPS portfolio. In general, power markets have responded with lower prices due to the effects of COVID in our country and due to the reduced demand. So 2 areas were identified by staff for the beneficial use of these excess funds, funds that we have that were lower than budget on, and that was vegetation management and electric capital reserves. So the vegetation management program is an important part of our district's goal of delivering safe and reliable and cost-effective electric service to our customers. It is also a critical component of the district's wildfire mitigation plan, which was revised and approved by the board earlier this year. The board awarded a contract for vegetation management, or more commonly referred to as tree trimming services to Wright Tree Service on December 4th of last year. The contract amount was for $1 million for this fiscal year 20. There has been a steady but significant increase in the tree trimming budget in recent years. The vegetation management budget or tree trimming budget for the last 5 years is shown in the following table and graph. And the big takeaway here is that the district is spending 4 times as much as we have in just 5 years. So in 2015, we were spending $250,000, and this fiscal year we're spending $1 million.
Joe, could I interrupt you and ask you a question? How have we had any power outages due to vegetation issues in the last year?
I don't recall specifically. Most of our outages are related to critters, momentary things, squirrels and birds and such. I'd have to look back in the records. Typically when we have vegetation issues,
In the wintertime.
it's in the wintertime when you have heavily loaded branches that were trimmed properly in the summertime and fall, but may, due to wind conditions and snow and ice, be way down into our lines. But that's the best time to have that condition, because typically, because of snow and ice and winter conditions, they don't burn.
Joe, a couple of years ago, didn't we have 3 tree contracts? We had, because it was, they were running short, and the time was getting worse. Didn't we add a second and a third one about 5-6 years ago or something?
Are you referring to crews, like adding a crew, a different crew? Because I think
I thought there was 3 different services, 3 different tree services.
you may be thinking of we only have 1 tree service.
Yeah.
Per
always
year,
had that.
but they have a certain amount of. You're probably thinking that, and I believe that's what you're referring to, is we increased the number of crews that the tree service was running in order to accomplish more.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was turned around there. Thank you.
Joe, do you know off the top of your head how many threat trees there are in the system currently?
There's quite a bit, General Manager. There are the number. It's over 1,000. I want to say the number that comes to my mind is something around 1,500 hazard trees that would be that could potentially fall into our lines. It's a significant number.
Just so everybody's aware, this gets us moving down the line, but it doesn't solve the problem, right? This is an ongoing. This is a Golden Gate Bridge issue. Yeah.
Can't we just stop these trees from growing?
So there are 3 principal reasons why the district is spending more each year on vegetation management, and these are wildfire in California, increasing regulation, specifically California General Order 95 or GO 95 requirements, and SB 247, the Wildland Fire Prevention Bill, and that was signed into law by Governor Newsom last October. And I'll be talking about these in detail on the next slide. So wildfires have devastated large portions of the state in recent years. Vegetation management, of course, is a key component of any utility's wildfire mitigation plan. You need to trim your trees around your lines. But investor-owned utilities have not performed well. They've done a less than adequate job, as we all have seen and experienced, and of course with devastating results to the state of California. Investor-owned utilities have ramped up operations with increased demand for which has increased demand for tree trimming service. They've ramped up their vegetation management operations. And the result of this increased demand is an upward pressure on costs for vegetation management for all utilities, including publicly owned utilities like the district. The second reason we are experiencing increasing costs is the increasing regulation, and specifically changes to GO 95, which is the standard that utilities in California adhere to for electric requirements. There is one requirement called the time of trim requirement. That was revised in December of 2017. So starting in fiscal year 18, we met the new standard, and this new standard required a change. We used to trim just 6.5 feet away from our conductors. This change required us to trim all the way to 12 feet. This doubling of the trim distance resulted in essentially a doubling of the cost to perform trimming by this single change in requirements alone. So this was a very significant impact to the district and our costs. And then last, and the last reason, and maybe the most significant reason for our cost increase is Senate Bill 247, the so-called Wildfire Prevention Bill, again signed into law by Governor Newsom last year. The gist of this law is that it requires the line clearance certified tree trimmers. Those are tree trimmers who are trained and certified to trim trees around energized lines. It requires them to be paid wages comparable to that of an apprentice electric lineman. This had the effect of overnight increasing their wages by about 50%. Technically, this law only applies to investor-owned utilities paying for tree trimming services. However, bids received by publicly owned utilities like the district realized the full increase in wages. And this was due to essentially market forces. In other words, if you're a tree trimmer, you're not going to come work for a POU when you can work for an IOU that's paying you 50% more. So the POUs now, the bid prices that POUs received were identical. And they had the full increase of the wage was reflected in the bid price. And although some increase in cost was anticipated by staff for fiscal year 20, the full effect of the law applying to the district was not anticipated. So the combined effect of wildfires, regulation, and SB 247 has greatly impacted the district's tree trimming budget. We've expended about 70% of the budget, 70% of the $1 million budget as of the end of July, and staff projects that we will exhaust the current budget by October if we don't increase this budget. And we estimate that a total budget of $1.5 million or a $500,000 increase will be necessary for this fiscal year and future fiscal years to have a trimming cycle that goes throughout the year across our district. So the fiscal impact, by way of review, of course, we have $1 million budgeted for fiscal year 20. The proposed contract increase of $500,000 will be funded by the Electric Department's general fund. The current balance in the general fund is about $9.5 million as of mid-August. The Electric Department is pacing favorable both in revenue and expenses year to date. We project to be $800,000 under expenses and revenues to be about $1 million over budget or favorable over the course of the year. And the majority of the savings in expenses is due to purchase power costs. We've had favorable generation conditions and market power costs. And revenues are favorable, and that's been driven primarily by increased residential energy usage compared to budget. So these combine on an annual projected basis for about $1.8 million for forecasted annual results. Therefore, there appears to be sufficient favorable results in the electric department operating budget to accommodate both an increase of $500,000 to the budgeted tree trimming service and to transfer approximately $550,000 to the electric capital reserve fund. And we note that with this proposed transfer, and that's why it's such an odd number, with this proposed transfer, the electric capital reserve fund will be fully funded in accordance with district goals. So it is therefore staff's recommendation to, one, authorize the general manager to execute an amendment and all necessary documents for an additional $500,000 funding for the tree trimming contract with Right Tree Service. This revision will increase the contract amount for fiscal year 20 from $1 million to an amount not to exceed $1.5 million, and two, transfer an additional $552,133 to electric capital reserves. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Joe. Krista?
I don't have any questions, just cut and dry.
All right.
Joe, I know we have to jump through the hoops.
Yes.
And we gotta come up with what we have to. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
I think this is well overdue. I'm glad we're moving forward on this. And I'm also thrilled to death that, we're in a financial position where, we can make this work without, significantly affecting our rates. And the nice thing also is by putting the money in the capital reserves, we have something there in case of an emergency in the future if we do need to tap it. So I think that's great to be moving forward with $1.5 million. I assume Wright has the ability to bring in more crews or to keep the current crews busy.
Yes.
And I'm sure we have plenty of trees to trim.
Yes, we do.
And I am concerned about the winter time, like you said, and I think that's their time that we have to be concerned about, the power outages. And I sure as hell don't want to, lose my power in the middle of the winter time during a storm, but I do know it happens once in a while, unfortunately. But if we can do everything we can to alleviate that, then that's very good planning. And my hat's off to you guys for bringing this forward. Glad you're doing it.
Nice. Tony, you're out there somewhere.
I'm out here. No, good comments from the board members. Kind of just a question for Joe. Out of the 500,000, I mean, obviously there's multiple reasons. How much of this extra do you believe is going towards additional work that's going to be completed this year versus the other reasons you've stated?
This additional 500,000 is simply to complete work, scheduled routine work that we do every year, all the way, because we can, unless there's a serious storm in the winter, we can have crews employed virtually 12 months out of the year. This is simply, and by way of reminder, our tree trimming cycle, so we have a cycle that we plan to get through our entire district, is 5 years. So we're trimming 20% of our district essentially every year. And so this additional increase is simply to keep us on that pace, that same pace.
Understood. So we are not completing more work. We're backfilling due to the reasons you've stated to get to our goal for this year. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. No, and I echo what Bob said, that, all the hard work with purchase contracts and obviously some favorable conditions have put us in a position to be able to make these transfers and meet our reserve goals and complete our our vegetation management program to stay on track. So good job, everyone.
Thanks, Tony. I have a question. It just gets me thinking about, undergrounding electrical. So we don't need to get into that now. This is awesome. Good points on all the board members. Total support. We've got to do it to stay on track. But then, if our power lines were underground, then we wouldn't need to trim the trees. Just something to think about for the future and for, what that ROI is, because at some point we're going to see that to start going towards more undergrounding our electrical.
Right. Well, I think the price pressure or the financial pressures around us will start to make that decision a more refined discussion, as opposed to saying, well, it's only costing us $200,000 and it costs us $3 million. We're rapidly moving towards, it's costing us $1.5 million to do trees and it's costing us $3 million to do a mile. And I'm making one of these numbers up. But I think that as those two price points start to move towards each other, that conversation becomes a strong reality.
Well, when we replace water pipes, is it beneficial to put electrical by water, or do you not like to do that?
You can, and Bob, again, that nuance to that conversation is really good, right? We're not engaged in major water line refits at this point, but as we move forward on some of those projects, as you've seen in the Far West capital program, as we start moving on to those projects, if we're going to tear up a whole lane of the road, the other lane, the price point for us to put electrical underground may all of a sudden make sense, right? Because depending on how the broadband conversation goes, it may not just be power here, water there. There may be another conduit in there somewhere. And so there is an economy of scale and a synergy of projects that we really need to be thinking about as we move our projects forward. And to the other points about us working collaboratively with the town and with the other utilities, if the town wants to do, for instance, if the town's watching, if the town wants to do River West, and we're going to put water in the ground, or we're going to modify the water, and we're going to drop power into the ground, there's a real economy here for us. And then areas where we've identified that we have a number of trees, I don't know, somewhere near Donner Lake maybe, we should maybe think about going underground. Because the problem's not going to go away, right? As you mentioned, the minute we cut one down, the sun hits the ground and grows another one. Right? So
Never ending.
it is never ending.
It's never ending. And we're dropping $500,000 and just to meet our goal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, that's just to keep up with the new regulations.
Right.
Which makes everything safer and, much more compliant.
On a 5-year term. So that $1.5 million that you put down today, you're going to have to put down again in 5 years.
Right.
Right? So the ROI conversation is, if the pipeline and everything lasts for 20 years, you've got $6 million that you're going to have to lay down just to keep the trees off the line. There's a real conversation here. The money is starting to hit a point where we really need to talk about it. So we'll be having that conversation for sure.
So doesn't the lines have to be at least 3 feet apart in a trench or?
Between water and electric?
Yeah.
I forget, there is a separation. I don't know it off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
yes, there is a separation.
So Joe, if I'm cutting open 6 feet of road, right? So if I'm cutting open a lane,
Yeah.
one whole lane, there's more than enough territory for me inside that opening.
Well, I would just say, if we got a big project where we are doing significant area, let's keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
Especially if our overhead lines are in a tree-infested area. You know, I mean, I'm assuming you can do small sections and it doesn't have to be a whole network and you have to do all at once.
Right. Yeah, it's economy of scale is the name of the game though, right, Bob? So, you know, if we can do 1,000 feet of water line or 1,000 feet of,
Well, didn't we put stuff underground in downtown?
we sure
Yeah, you
do.
did, right by the.
Yeah, right out front.
All of this out front was done. Yeah. So, we know what we're doing, and roughly, is it 30% underground of the system?
Yes, I think we have 135 miles of overhead and 70-ish miles of underground total.
Is there any way we can try to get some federal funds to help us with that in the future?
Yes. So wildfire mitigation funds are starting to be delivered, and I think, I'll tell you right now, I am looking for grant writers that I can contract to start leveraging some of those funds. And, you know, undergrounding power, protecting watershed, enhancing watershed, all of those things are available to us, I think, at this point. So it'll be making sure that we get in and avail ourselves of those opportunities, for sure.
In the short term,
In the short term,
we're gonna cut some trees, I think. So is there any public input, Shauna, on this item? Does anyone want us not to cut the trees?
No, Mr. President, I don't see any.
or fill up our reserve.
Or fill up our reserves, that's right.
All right, James, you want to pull that back up?
Is there a motion?
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Hey, Tony grabs the motion.
I'll second it.
Bob got the second. Roll call, please, Shauna.
Thank you, Director Laliotta.
Yes.
Yes.
Director Rivera.
Yes.
Vice President Finn.
Yes.
President Bender.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And then you'll tag team, pass the baton to Steve. Number 12, approve an amendment to the 2020 traffic control service contract with Traffic Management, Inc. Steve, hands up. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Good evening.
More traffic work. In order to cut trees, we gotta direct traffic.
And you can go on to the PowerPoint slide for 11, and then just hit the down button. Then it should go one more. There you go. Now you get to the.
All right, where to look? Now you can see.
Good evening, President Bender, and members of the board. Tonight I'm presenting action item number 12, amendment to the 2020 Traffic Control Service Contract with Traffic Management Incorporated. The Electric and Water Department require periodic traffic control services for new construction and maintenance projects within the district's service territory. In 2018, the district awarded a contract to Traffic Control Services for fiscal year 2019 with two options to extend the contract year over year. In December of 2019, the board approved an extension of the contract for $225,000 for fiscal year 2020. Items harder to anticipate are emergency needs for the district, including such things as water leaks, accidents, and damage to district facilities due to snow removal operations. During the time we presented in 2018, we did not anticipate an increase in emergency work. However, we have seen that to date. Another reason for increase in cost is increase in productivity, which the GM has mentioned in his opening statements, such as Northwood Pole Plant Rebuild Project and staff meeting the 60 pole installs for the year, which happened in early August. Other reasons are the rebuild project being so long that they needed additional staff on site rather than the normal 2 traffic control personnel. There may be 3 or 4 because of side street traffic, curves in the road, additional equipment needed to keep our crews safe so they can do their work efficiently. The vast majority of the traffic control service costs are components of other capital projects available work orders. As such, the contract covers some billable projects like snow removal accidents, developer projects and vehicle accidents. As such project and or work order is planned, budgeted, and ultimately approved by the board. Sufficient funds exist in the board-approved district fiscal year 20 budget and approved capital projects as applicable for the proposed increase in existing contracts. Staff recommends authorizing the general manager to execute an amendment and all necessary documents with Traffic Management Inc., increasing the contract amount for fiscal year 20 from $225,000 to a not to exceed amount of $425,000. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Guerra, you have any issues with increasing our traffic control?
No, I know, that we have to increase that, because we'll be using them more and more as we go, right?
Yes, sir.
And, this is, of course, it's kind of an estimated amount, isn't it?
It is, sir.
But it's pretty close, and it might even be, over the amount that we need.
That is correct. Staff looked at known needs for the water and electric department and then padded that for emergency work. So we do not have to come back to the board this year.
Yeah, that's right. I read at the bottom there, traffic accidents and a few other emergency things going. So we don't know how many we're gonna get of those.
That's correct.
Okay, so, your number is 425.
Yes, sir.
The magic number.
The magic number for this year.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I got.
Got it.
It sounds like it's a necessary thing for safety, and I think, we should, move forward with it.
Great. Tony?
No comments. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for all the hard work with the crews out there getting those projects done. And I know Krista still has to go, but I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Grabbing all the glory.
Yes, taking the glory.
That's all right.
Krista.
Correct. I also support spending money on the safety of our crews. So, yes.
Nice.
And I'll second the motion.
All right, I don't have any other additional comments. Good work, Steve. A lot of work. We got to protect everybody. And is there any public input on this item?
Mr. President, I do not see any public input.
Okay. We have a motion already and a second. Roll call, please.
Thank you. Director Laliot.
Yep.
Director Ellis.
Yes.
Director Guerra.
Yes.
Vice President Fenn.
Yes.
President Fenn.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Shauna, you're up.
Come on.
You got number 13.
That is a lucky number.
It is.
Hey, another 200,000.
It's my 5th grade student number. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, sir. Revised district values.
Well, it is with great pleasure to provide this presentation on action item 13, revising the district's value. The district's mission really outlines what the district does. And in order to achieve that mission, a highly professional workforce is retained, and retaining a high-performing workforce requires training and development. The board and staff identified areas of professional development for the district back in 2018, at which time we embarked with Pamela Hurton Associates to roll out certain professional developments for the organization. In 2019, the board memorialized our value and Resolution 2019-10. These values, as identified, were all weighted equally. And values are really the foundation of culture. Their cultural values are identified as the elaborate system of behavior that defines a group. Essentially, the way we behave when we conduct business and how we meet our goals into our values. A great amount of energy continues to surround the onboarding of General Manager Scherzinger. And General Manager Scherzinger and Mrs. Hobday met with staff throughout the district, brainstorming concepts and focusing on the future of the district. Coining the term painting the landscape, these innovative and creative process looks at where the district wants to be in the future. This was the first step in our strategic planning process, and Mrs. Hobday and General Manager Scherzinger will talk more about the strategic planning in the next item. But a common theme emerged out of these meetings, which employees with a grassroots initiative wanted to revise the values. First of them is safety first. This will also depict in our visuals as well, our visual stuff on our safety value statements and all of that. Not shocking, we usually think of our linemen as #1 safety product out there. Power poles are upwards of 75 feet tall. Our line trucks go as high. Usually we have 4 members on that crew. 1 or 2 going in a bucket truck, 1 staying on the ground monitoring, and there's a great picture to the left and to the right of our line crew. And they're monitoring hazards, traffic, potentially touching line, all of that stuff. So it really encompasses on what they do. We also look at our water crews who also have a lot of issues dealing with our water quality that we provide to our customers. They can have trench collapses, mains breaking, more traffic, more hazard, and they're all doing this at environmental level. So the pictures that we've depicted up here are the top middle is a water facility in the little white thing, and a pole that is undermined by a lot of water. So our crews are going out there. If we couple on to what Steve Moore was saying, that would cause a traffic control issue. But a proud shout out to our water crews. They've gone over 11 years without a lost time injury. That's a huge feat in our field. We tend not to think of a risk associated with our office personnel, but our office personnel are also out in the public sphere as well. Our engineers are with our crews. They're looking at project management, all of that stuff. So we do have a high level of safety within our organization. And our professional and technical staff have gone over 15 years without a lost time injury. So communication is a value. This was another item that came out of the grassroots from employees. Communication is an important topic, as Director Fenn, Vice President Fenn pointed out. Sending and receiving of information is a treasured component in culture. Not only hearing what someone says, asking the right questions, and being able to disseminate that data is all important. We also did an employee survey for our values and asked the employees to rank these values of importance. And the graph depicts that safety is their #1 value and communication is second, followed by integrity, accountability, and timeliness, and work-life balance. I thought this was a very interesting thing that the commitment of our employees puts the district higher than their own work-life balance. So revisiting and revising the values gave us a couple things. Employees had input that was very important, and we heard them, and we're committed to addressing that. And it also created a space where we could discuss and confirm these values. So to review our values, safety is our way of life. Safety is our first priority. We're committed to the health and safety of our employees, customers, and community through the continuous practice of prevention, education, and awareness. Communication, send and receive. Foster positive engagement by creating a strong communicative environment that includes active listening, transparency, clear and concise, and the timely transmission of information with empathy and respect. This also includes providing and receiving honest feedback. Integrity, honest and ethical. Highest quality service to the public and employees, utilizing honest and ethics as our basic principle. Accountability, own it. A strong performing team with the obligation and willingness to accept responsibility for our actions, maintaining a sense of humility and inclusiveness. Timeliness, meeting our goals and commitments. A highly effective agency, responsive organization, meeting goals and expectations in a timely manner. And work-life balance. We value every employee and foster a healthy work-life balance culture, allowing employees to bring their best selves to work every day. There is not a material fiscal impact associated with this item, and staff's recommendation is the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 2020-21, revising the district's values.
Great, thank you, Shauna.
You're welcome.
Good, Director, questions. Bob, do you have any?
I don't have any questions. That was very thoughtful, and that was a good presentation. Thank you, Sean.
Tony?
Nothing in particular, just appreciate Rem jumping in, bringing Pam on board and getting the staff to re-engage again with this with these topics and to reevaluate them so that they stay at the forefront of our daily activities and show the community that we continue to work hard internally so that our external affairs and our customers and our priorities outside of the district continue to be executed. So thank you.
Yeah, Ben.
Mr. President, if I might, I'd like to amend or add just a Y to integrity. So it says the highest quality service to the public and employees utilizing honesty, not honest, and ethics as our basis of principles.
I got hung up saving it.
So once we get to the motion, I would request an as amended.
Krista?
Yeah, I just wanted to state that I agree with this realignment of the values, that culture and values are kind of a living, breathing thing, which we have to continue to pay attention to. When our people have input, we need to hear it. And I personally really agree with, I mean, as a government entity, I believe that my number one overriding purpose is safety. It is making our community more safe, more resilient. So it makes perfect sense to me. That's the reason that we kind of exist. So yeah, I approve, I agree. Thank you for continuing to keep it in the forefront of our district staff, ourselves, and our community.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that it was grassroots, so really it means a lot more, and we'll make that change with the motion, and so really glad that there's this accountability in it. Here we are. Everybody's owning this, so really like to ditto the other comments from the directors. And Joe, I think I forgot you.
Well, no, we got that sign still up over there.
Right, don't worry, Shauna's going to take care of that.
Yeah. Depending on this evening, it may not be long-lived.
Okay, it's going to be a little different sign now.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's going to have these.
We
Yes.
kicked that to our brilliant Stephen Potsley to give us a new visual to update these values for our employees and you know, kind of give them a better visual.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that sign that we put here, didn't we have one in the lobby too at one time?
We have them throughout the entire district.
Right?
We through
Just around the
conference
building.
rooms, everywhere.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got it now. So we're going to have a new sign.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Shauna. And I think we put up the signs, and then I just assumed, we haven't heard another word about them, but I assumed that we were living by them anyway.
We're living them. Our values and our culture are embedded in our hiring process, you know, the board embarked on a large hiring process for General Manager Scherzinger, and we put that into play into all hires.
Yeah, I think that, Joe, this is an interesting creation out of a process as I'm coming on board in conversations with our crews, direct, general manager to crew, with Mrs. Hobday in the room. They brought this forward as an issue that when you look at the sign, safety is the fourth one, and safety should be the first one.
Yeah.
And so very quickly, in reaction to that piece of information and to their forthrightness, right? So I appreciate the crew's openness, their ability, their safety in that space to be able to communicate with me, and their comfort to bring this to our attention. And I think that this demonstrates the communication value that we're fostering inside the organization at this point and will continue to grow, is that when we hear stuff like that, we want to take action on it very quickly, and especially as it relates to something as important, in my opinion, as this. And so staff very quickly brought the survey forward. We had 100% participation?
We were at 97%.
97% participation.
We had 2 employees on vacation.
For all staff. So again, there isn't a part of this process where staff wasn't fully engaged, staff wasn't participating, staff felt invalid. So everybody was at the table and was having this conversation, and I salute everyone, because this is the evolution of this. And it is correct. There are times when we may want to modify this as our organization grows, as we take on additional challenges. But for now, these are our values, and this is the hierarchy of those values. And so again, I applaud staff on every level for working with, as a whole, to come to this table and change and offer to you, the board, a resolution making this modification.
I think I've got all the directors. There is public input. Sean's going to run back to the public input.
My apologies.
Any emails? No worries.
Mr. President, we do not have any public input.
Okay. No public input. Input from all the directors and Rem and Shauna, thank you. Is there a motion?
I move that we adopt Resolution 2020-21, revising the district statute
Excellent.
Second the motion.
as amended.
As amended.
On it.
Oh, that's right.
Honesty. Yeah. And a second by Joe. Roll call, please.
Director Laliota,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Director Aguirre,
Yes.
Vice President Smith,
Yes.
President Bender.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. We have item number 14. Pam and Rem in the hot seat.
I just wanted to say hello to President Bender, Vice President Finn, and both directors, and Tony out there. It's really good to see you.
Okay. Yep. Of course it's me.
Of course.
Shauna, you broke it.
Oh, probably exit full screen, right? There we go.
No, so it's either this one,
Uh-huh.
this one?
Yep.
No. And then I go down, and there's nothing there. You sure? This one? I know you're listening, Ian.
Yes.
No, don't leave the meeting.
Oh, this, yeah, minimize. standing by.
All right. Share screen. Yep. Here. There. Okay. There.
Click once.
All right. There we go. All right. Here we go. First time in the saddle, right?
There we are.
Okay. So, good evening, board, members of staff and public. This evening, we are considering the authorization of the general manager to execute a contract and all necessary agreements with Pamela Hurt Associates for strategic planning. The strategic planning process, all right, Pam, you gotta go that way. All right, the strategic planning process that we're about to embark on has many steps, but suffice to say that our process is going to be more elegant than a standard strategic planning process. One of the things that we want to cover is create a greater opportunity to look at ideas and to challenge our stakeholders and our community and ourselves through this process. So unlike strategic plans where we set some quick goals, we create some operational objectives, and then we take off, this is more in line with the work that the district has been doing with Hurt and Associates for many months in terms of stabilizing and preparing the district, onboarding the CFO, and bringing on the new general manager. We're also looking at, we want to do this as an event through the board and community and staff involvement, bringing the resources of the community by focusing on resiliency and sustainability. So talking about those two topics with all three sectors together in an effort to develop a strategic plan as we move forward. We want to pioneer new ideas, and we want to analyze potential of expansion of services. So where we want to understand or think about how to bring the tremendous power of this organization and this staff to benefit our community. What needs does the community have? What wants do they have? A PUD can do many, many things, and limiting it to its water and power function may or may not be something that we in the community want to do. So we want to challenge the community and the board and staff with, is there something that we're missing? Is there something that we should be doing or can be doing either better or a service that we want to provide? We want to analyze or be conscious of, we want to be a conscious provider of environmental services. Something our strategic plan hasn't done, but we want to recognize that we are a resource agency. It isn't just about extraction of resources from the environment. We want to make sure that it's being done sustainably, resiliently. So we want to think about watersheds because the Marks Valley needs that. We want to think about where our power comes from, why it comes from there, how are we addressing that? And we want to have that thought process inside the strategic planning event. We want to talk about a high level of inclusivity and transparency. This board, this agency has engaged in this for many, many months, and you have done a fantastic job. We want to leverage the work that you've done so far and bring that, again, into the district. Work on our strategic plan together with the community and our stakeholders so that we can create a plan, we can create a strategic event and goals that reach beyond just a 2-year or 1-year event, that we're thinking ahead, right? There are a lot of powers at play here, and there is a lot of money moving. We want to make sure that we're using it effectively, appropriately, and consistently, and that we're in the right place at the right time. We want to talk about the fiscal health and success of the organization. We need to be thinking further out than just 2 years. And so the strategic plan needs to do that. And we want to create a future together, not just the board and staff, not just the board staff and ratepayers, the board staff, the ratepayers, and our community. With that, we have these are our pillars, the 4 pillars of our process. Community, clearly, we want them involved. The board of directors, another pillar of our decision-making. The executive leadership team, this brings all of staff forward to communicate in this space, and then the PUD employees. With these 4 pillars built, the district can effectively, cohesively decisions for our future here in the community. With that, I will turn over this slide. Ms. Abdi.
Thank you, Mr. Scherzinger. What's unique about these 4 pillars is that we will be implementing processes, structures, strategies, engagement of all 4 groups at the same time over the next 7 months. So that's why it's complex. And again, thanks to all of your leadership, it's unique, it's cutting edge. So as you look at the Pamela Hurt Associates Strategic Business Planning Model, I've had so much fun working with Mr. Scherzinger on this. And I have to tell you that I'm going to refer to this as the Revolution. And that came from, you heard earlier that Mr. Scherzinger and I met with different groups of employees throughout the district. And as Mr. Scherzinger was explaining some things to, he was very animated and he was explaining some things to a group of employees. One employee said, "This is a revolution."
Really wanted to talk about that, but okay.
but the reason it's important is it inspired me to present to Mr. Scherzinger a model that we usually use just in private industry, not in government. This is it. And I want to explain to you the differentiators here. And not only is this organization ready for it, you can really believe each of you can lead the community as well. So it's a 2-phased approach, and the first blue bucket, so to speak, talks about the integration of the pillars, the community board, executive staff, and staff. Notice it's future focused. And one of the first things we're going to be doing with the community, in December, we're going to do a community survey. You all will weigh in on that survey. We are going to think future focused and high level of community engagement, getting as many people engaged in what do we want them to be thinking about in the future? What are we interested in knowing? Where is our community? And then secondly, in January, we're going to do focus groups. And we'll take the data from the focus groups, and I hope those focus groups will be centered by neighborhood. Because what we found in Truckee Tomorrow, when we did focus groups neighborhood by neighborhood, there were different cultures in our neighborhoods here in Truckee. And we had a higher level of turnout and people being very engaged. Now, here's the critical thing. The processes that we're going to use are strategic thinking processes. So what does that really mean? Strategic thinking requires innovation. Now, when you all think about when have you been innovative in your life? I mean, maybe it's a simple thing as standing at the top of a 4-foot powder day and deciding which, line you're going to take. Or am I really going over that jump, in your mountain bike? But in business, as you all are business people, you've had to innovate many, many times. That requires the ability to live in our minds. Because we have to think 5, 10, 15, 30 years out. And to have the community be able to, in a moment in time, live in their minds and articulate mental time travel. And that's how people get excited about thinking of new ideas, the what ifs. What I really want to see in Truckee in 5 years is this. We need this. Our community's changing. So we have to lead that process for the community, for you, the board, as leaders with staff. And that becomes feeding the community in anticipation of what the community and societal needs are. So in order for our workshop with the board and staff, we're going to practice, challenging assumptions so that when we are in focus groups, we can lead the community in really having rich discussions about what do they see the role of the PUD being now and the future, and is there something that they really want us to focus on. After we go through the painting the landscape, the SWOT, I'm going to talk more about the cash cow analysis, and I'm really excited for you to hear about the district's social environmental responsibility model. This really fits you, and this Mr. Scherzinger, excuse me, Ram's fine, talk to me about this. And in private industry, we've been doing this for about 10 years. I only know of 2 other government agencies that have really engaged in this. There probably are more, but probably not in California. And this is significant and will be meaningful to each of you. So we're going to go into a little bit more depth in just a moment about those. But once we complete those 4 processes, we're going to apply the information, the creative thinking, instead of there's in the box, outside of the box, we're going to be no box thinking, no boundaries. Okay, to really give the community what it deserves. Okay, being very, very innovative, we will define organizational goals. Those are high-level, overarching goals. And from there, we're going to marry how important the values are with culture. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. And then we will do project plans or strategies that will show the metrics of how we're going to measure what we want to get done with these goals. So everything's going to be measured. Going on to one of the processes that is unique for government is implementing a cash cow analysis. This was founded by the Boston Consulting Group and is used very typically in Fortune 500 and 400 companies. And this process that we will go through at a workshop in October or November really focuses on potential, value, and impact. And products, as we would say in private industry, are really project plans or projects that we want to use to implement these overarching goals or ideas or, whatever your decisions are as to the priorities of the goal. But it requires lateral thinking. And that's where Rem and I really got excited. Because lateral thinking you do all the time. Vertical thinking is easy. It's yes or no, we're going to put a pole right here. Lateral thinking is, why do we put the pole here at all? What's the other option? Okay? It requires...
grounding.
Yeah! Grounding!
That's where that softball was going to get hit.
Yeah, the grounding! I almost said the same thing.
Right.
But what's fun about lateral thinking is you're able to, in groups of people, once you start thinking laterally, you challenge each other's assumptions. You're able to ask without personalizing, why do you feel that way? And really, really get to the baseline of what the group or team really is interested in. It opens ideations and thoughts for different pathways, and we'll use this model as a mechanism to measure creating value to our community.
Use community, it's a strategic word.
Yes, and it's a handoff to Ram.
So one of the things that, so probably not such a great, well, it's a great benefit, but the fact that I'm driving for 50 minutes and I'm listening to various podcasts and whatnot, one of the things that came up was this corporate social responsibility model. And this is a thing in the private sector where we're talking about how corporations are giving back to their community via philanthropy, via activity, via programs and services. My thought was, where does that fit in the public sector model? It's not something I was exposed to during my MBA, and so I quickly shot Pam, I think it was an email saying, or no, it was a phone call to say, hey, what about the corporate social responsibility model, and how does that overlay onto strategic planning and our thinking as we move forward? Yeah, I got to take that off.
Yeah, I know, it's horrible.
So, thinking about that, we've expanded it into this social environmental responsibility model, recognizing that the district's complete function is social responsibility, right? The district is created to deliver a service to society, but how do we do that in this newer way? How do we do it in a cohesive way? And how do we do it with the kind of, I'm sure you've all heard of triple bottom line, right? So social, environmental, and economic value. How do we add environmental responsibility inside that? And so that has created this. And so what we're talking about here, you'll see that at the top and the bottom, there are arrows that point into longevity, sustainability, and ethics. The reason the arrow points there is think about it as a leg to the table. These things do not change for the organization. We have to think long-term. We think sincerely because there has to be an honest interaction there. We are a service provider. We have to think sustainably. How do we continue to make sure that the resources available to our community and they can count on that delivery? And then we have to do it ethically. The outer part is, and the reason the arrows are on two sides for goals, resources, market and community and responsibility is there's a give and take in these spaces. The goals may change for our organization as the demands around the organization change. Resources, we may need to change how we deal with our resources. What is okay today may not be okay tomorrow. We may find that there's a better resource somewhere else. We need to be able to have that conversation and move those things back and forth. Market and community. While the boundary of our organization does not change, the demands that the community may make on our organization do change. And the regulatory environment in which our organization does change. And so we need to have an ongoing dialogue in that space as well. And then responsibility. Who are we being responsible to as a service provider? That is always changing. And so we always want to keep our radar up so that we can identify those groups and bring service to them as we're moving forward. So this model speaks to that in that, so the quote in the bottom corner, right, this is a self-regulating, I can't read it because I'm talking. This is a self-regulating business model that will help the district be socially and environmentally accountable to our stakeholders, ourselves, and our community. I would add the S onto that, communities. One of the things that you will hear as we're moving forward is this thought process that the community isn't just those members of humans. It may be an environmental community, it may be vertical, it may be horizontal. We want to be thinking beyond just our physical regulatory limits. And so with this thought process, I want to move us into a strategic planning event that has all of this in it, so that we're talking about all of these things, so that we can set goals that are appropriate for this district and for our communities and our states.
And I would just add one more thing to this model. What was interesting, and Ram and I have talked about this is really what you guys do. Most other organizations that are my clients, there's some parts of this they don't do. And so this fit is going to be really interesting, especially after community input. Okay, what do we do with values and culture? We've spent 8 to 10 months on culture. You know, we have talked about culture, we've defined culture, we've spent weeks and weeks defining skill sets for hiring of our general manager, which we applied to our CFO hiring as well. And the umbrella for all of the cultural discussion were our values. In strategic planning, what we do is we take the values and you see the circle, which is the culture, and we say, for example, communication. What does that look like here at the district? And we get staff input, we get board input with staff, and we define what do we want to see? What's tangible? What can we measure in this culture? So that when we use our hiring process that we spent 8 months developing, we can apply not only the values as the umbrella, but what the expectations are for employees and ourselves in the culture. And now it comes to you guys. Remember, we're going to be doing things simultaneously with all 4 of those pillar groups. We are planning 7 different board workshops, okay, beginning September 16th. And I think you've all gotten the dates, but if you haven't, you will get them. And you can see in each of these icons, starting with the 16th, we're really going to be talking about this bigger picture of painting the landscape and applying our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to that. In October, we're going to be looking at that cash cow analysis, as well as we want your input on the community survey. We also want to begin talking about what do those focus groups look like? What are these questions we want to ask? In November, we're really going to focus on developing this social environmental responsibility model. In December, there won't be a workshop, but the rest of the pillars will be very busy because we will do the staff survey in December. My company has found that December is a great time to do, not staff survey, community survey. Great time to do community survey. Yes, people are busy. I don't know what it's going to be like in this COVID environment, but we usually have a very high return on our investment in our outreach during December. People are benevolent, feel that they want to be helpful. In January, we're going to, with the board workshop, January is going to be the big focus groups, which you will participate in, obviously. We're going to take the data then at our workshop in January from the community survey and the focus groups and do a gap analysis. That is really going to be an interesting analysis. And from there, we begin to apply this data and the ideas and your ideas and staff ideas into that social responsibility, environmental responsibility model, and look at the culture and values and begin to think about setting our overarching goals, which will occur in March. That is going to be one of the coolest, really innovative workshops that we've ever had together. Not only will we do goal setting, but we'll do a process where you're able to define, using money, what your priorities are. And then in April, you will approve or adopt the strategic goals, and done. Just like that.
Well, at that point, then you will have completed your strategic goals, and we will begin our budgeting for the 22-23 season. So it really is a progression, right? If we think back to where you guys started last year, you started preparing for leadership transition. You have transition leadership, and I would say seamlessly, right? Just like handing off the baton in the relay race. We have transition leadership at full speed. We're in week 7 of my arrival, and we're working. We have initiatives moving on renewable power. We have initiatives moving on broadband. We have made significant motion forward just in these 7 weeks. And we could only do that with the work that you, as the board and staff, did before we got to that place. Now that we're here, I want to capture that momentum and continue forward. Pam has been integral in this process, and so using her expertise and my expertise and the developed expertise at the ELT, we can propel ourselves towards an adoption of our strategic plans in April, setting us up for a truly cohesive, and I think you guys will be impressed at the budget work that we're preparing for you next year. It'll be very different than anything that you've seen in the past, and be much more, in the terms of Mr. Ponce, much more open kimono and interactive with you in terms of how we allocate and how we make the decisions with our funds. So, with that, the professional services contract that we have before you this evening, the contract amount currently, the contract before you this evening is for $127,312.50. I would let the board know that the 3 contracts that we have completed with Pam thus far have come to a total of $229,525. And that was for 3 work activities, bringing the district up to speed on culture, hiring the CFO, and hiring the GM. I think everybody in the room would say that these were dollars well spent as we continue forward on our journey. The board did allocate roughly $200,000 for this activity in the current budget. I would also pass along that we came in under budget on Pam's contracts, and that so we have $20,000 coming in from the encumbered contracts, which reduces our budget expenditure to $106,400, which is roughly half of what the budget for this activity was. And so we've come in under budget, we're contracted under budget, and we continue to move forward with speed and focus. And I would request that the board authorize the general manager to execute the contract and all necessary agreements with Pamela Hurt and Associates for our strategic planning event. With that, I will take any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll take questions. Tony, do you have any, gosh, I'm losing my voice. Tony, do you have any comments, questions?
No, that was a very thorough presentation. I think it was excellent for the board to see the process, the schedule, the milestones, laid out. We've been talking about this as a board for quite some time to try and get some workshops together to try and kick this process off, work together, establish goals, and move forward. So I think this is all headed in the right direction. It's another example of REM not only hitting the ground running, but jumping on board with a very fast moving ship, and keeping up. So I appreciate that, and appreciate you continuing to push these initiatives forward, recognizing staff and the board's accomplishments to date, and trying to build upon them.
Thanks, Tony. Krista?
Great. That was a great presentation. I am very excited to start this work. We're in a moment of just relentless change. I think all of us are feeling pretty buffeted, but that is the call to think harder, think longer, think more strategically, and plan. That, to me, is the lesson of 2020. We need to plan more. I'm excited to get down into the meat of this, to talk to my other board members, to formulate what it is that what we can reimagine for ourselves and for our communities. And I really thank you for pointing out communities. We should be saying communities. You're exactly right. Even with just our human components, we definitely do have communities within our community. That doesn't even include this world and whatnot. So yeah, I'm excited. I am, it's a natural continuation of arc that we've already been traveling, of change and renewal and transition. So I look forward to the next year. I really do. I'm excited. I can't wait to be back in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Krista. Joe?
Oh, did I see a date in here when we can start if we vote on it?
So we're gonna start in 2 weeks, Joe.
In 2 weeks. Yeah, it was the 15th, was it?
16th.
Oh, the 16th, okay. I heard the date, and I thought I read it someplace.
Yeah.
And so, I think the presentation was, you know your stuff.
Yeah.
And another thing, Brem knows how to read it. Yeah, that's,
his stuff
we got
too.
to kick off with, we gotta keep going there. So, and I think this is gonna set, like the last project we had here, and it just ended, continue on the same as what Krista said. And, I think we're going to climb from here on up.
I agree. I think you guys will be, I have to say, I'm tremendously impressed at the work the ELT and staff has done so far with the SWOT and painting the landscape. It is impressive, and I'm very excited to share it with you in 2 weeks and to go through the work that we've done just in the 7 weeks that I've been here. But it's pretty amazing.
Thanks, Joe. Bob?
I like the strategic planning, information, and I like the idea of thinking outside the box, but my concern is, are we gonna be interfering with things that the town of Truckee should be doing, or, is that gonna be an issue, or, how far out of the box are we gonna be thinking?
And that's the communication thing. That's what's so big. It's like we are already talking to the town, and where is there synchronicity in that? And how can we work together without taking everybody off? We work together to get what the community wants done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've done a good job with Grace Crossing to a point, and we've been trying very, very hard for several years to get that, going. And I feel like we're finally making baby steps in that area, hopefully.
We absolutely are.
And, so that's good for the tax base and just the community as a whole.
Yep.
But, I think it's great that we're doing this, but on the other hand, I don't wanna raise our rates because we're spending a ton of money where the town or other government agencies should be doing what we're doing.
I think that's a fantastic cautionary tale, Director Ellis, and I think it's very important to make sure that we recognize bookends on activity. Right, the town has its role in our community, and I think that one of the things that we want to be conscious of as we're moving through this process is definitely bringing those other players into our space, or recognizing their value to this organization, but also our value to them. Because there are opportunities, there are synergies where they have their role to play. And the Grace Crossing is a perfect example where we're running the CFD. We don't want to run land use, we don't want to be involved in that, but we want to support them in their role and their activity. And if there's a way that they can help us and we can help them, for instance, our renewable diesel opportunity, we both benefit. There is a synergy there, and by both organizations benefiting, the community benefits in the end, right? Everybody gets a lower GHG, and it's cheaper for both organizations. So,
well, before we had a town here, from what I understand, many, many years ago, Joe, you might have been involved with it. The PUD was involved with putting in the Ponderosa Golf Course. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and I think the Ponderosa Golf Course, which is now under the auspices of the town of Truckee
Right,
is a great, great benefit. I
absolutely.
mean, because you can't play golf for less than $100. That's up there.
Right.
I wasn't on the board then, but then, before me, but I knew.
You were alive.
I knew the man that did it. I can't remember his name, he lives in Donner Lake.
We should recognize that PUDs were created to take the role until a city or a town could be formed. So while the town was still, even before its infancy, the PUD was the strongest entity, or was the entity where those resources were focused. So we're in a different place now. There are other special districts, and we recognize that, I think. But I think that it's.
I just don't want to step on any.
I'm totally with you. I don't either, right? Because that diminishes both entities. And I think.
And then the same, and also I don't want our rates to be going up because we're wasting money on something that, some of our ratepayers don't want to pay for.
Exactly. And that, I think, Bob, that's why we need to have those workshops. That's why we need to do the surveys, because if we get onto a track where we're like, oh, this is what they want, and we're not hearing it right, then we end up spending money in a place that the community doesn't want. So we want to have a very clear, open, honest conversation with our community so that they can say, yeah, that's what I want, and react to that. And that's why we put, I think it's safe to say that's why we put so much effort into this process, right? Because I'll tell you, everybody, if you want me to put together a quick set of goals, put together some strategic objectives in them, and put them in the budget, I'm more than capable of doing that, but it won't address that question, right? I would be creating the goals for the community. That doesn't seem to fit. And if there is, for instance, the broadband issue, if there is a community cry for a service, we want to make sure that we're trying to provide that service, or we can find somebody to do it. Because I don't think there's ownership here. If through the survey we find out that it's a more trash service, we can pass along that information to the town and try to help them. So I'm extraordinarily cost conscious, Bob, as you know, and very rate focused. So as you'll see later on this evening, but I appreciate your point, and I think that having those bookends in our mind and those thoughts in our minds as we're going through this process is tremendously important.
That's all I got.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate the broadband thing. Just what in the meetings that we're having, we're seeing a lot of need for that, especially with students at the school district, staff at the school district. There's not that gigabit connection with our students, especially with all of them at home, doing classroom at home, and then communication for fire, communication for all, with helping the town between all their facilities, and then seeing the map of the miles of fiber we already have and conduit in the ground.
Well, weren't we involved with broadband like 12 or 15 years ago?
Right, exactly. And now with all what's happening, if we go through this process, we're going to see that, I feel we'll see that need from the community, or not. But from our conversations we're having and what I'm seeing, hearing from the school district with Red's interaction with them already, there is a really big need to essentially capitalize all the town and the other districts and government agencies to capitalize on what the PUD has already done regarding broadband, and how we can then help all these other organizations do their job.
I thought we had a contract with Plymouth Sierra for.
We do. We're so close to really, and having a strategic plan just provides that open and transparent communication and confirming the need that, yes, we want to do this to make sure we can then finish the job, if that's what the community wants. And I believe it is. But it's nice to have the metrics and the data to support it.
Well, last go around on the broadband, one of the school years was going to TV. And that's what kind of killed the whole project.
And that's the whole point of this thing. There's so many benefits to it, the strategic planning. I get really excited about hearing it. The benefits are enormous and then there's unintended benefits that we don't even know about. And then going through the process with the culture, the values, and the personal growth that we've all had, that I've seen in myself and members of this board and staff, it's exciting. Yeah, it's pretty rad. I'm more than happy to approve this contract to keep us going, to get us to that next level. And we've never really done this before, so, and it's just great to then have that input from the community to really hang our hat on the metrics and get after it. So, Tony, did I forget you, or did I have you?
You started.
Oh, you started.
Yeah, he started.
Okay, he's good. He's giving thumbs up.
Do you
Shauna,
have any input yet?
yeah, I was just going to ask Shauna for that.
Yes, Mr. President, we have a public comment that came in,
Okay,
and I'll read it verbatim since it's in an email.
copy.
It is from Kim Harris. She states the strategic plan is excessive in cost at $127,000. Per Ms. Hot Day, the district spent weeks and weeks on culture, and her fees were upwards of $265,000. With this contract, it is a total of $392,000 for Ms. Hot Day's consulting services in the past 2 years. The staff has several MBAs on staff. Use the expertise we already have on staff. The prior agenda item changed the priority of the culture because they did not listen to the employees first. Why are we paying so much money for it to be changed since it wasn't done correctly in the first place? It is a simple process that is being made complicated in order to go through the process to come right back to the mission statement. Keep it simple, keep the district small, and be careful about spending too much money on a process that should be a fraction of the cost. Respectfully submitted to Mayor.
Oh, and I did get a phone call today from Becky Mazer, kind of stating a lot of the similar aspects of that email.
I also had a phone call from Becky Mazer, but she was wanting her ideas put out there, the same sort of thing she felt like we were being fiscally irresponsible.
I'm surprised there's no other comments, sir.
Is this is our public input, or is there more?
No, Mr. President, that is the only one.
Where's it out?
Just on the agenda, sir.
And, well, that's why we don't have very many comments.
I just think, just to talk about this openly, yes, it's kind of expensive. Before I really got to know you, Pam, I had some questions in the beginning. And I just keep going back to the unintended benefits and then also the intended benefits. We had an ultimate win and the transition was seamless. And I mean, that speaks enormous value, and you can hang real dollars on the savings of what we've already accomplished in the 7 weeks here of Wildfire, and then trickling down with those values of hiring our new CFO, and then just really looking inward at these values, the culture. It's like, we know where we're at. And just going back to all the interviews for your position, Rem, it was just like, okay, we have a gut feeling here. But gut feeling is, it's only a very small fraction. I like to see the numbers, the metrics, where it lines up with specific values and characteristics and skill sets. I mean, I could go on for hours on this, and the where we're at right now and understanding those values, where those skill sets are, is enormous. You can't just go out and hire a very high-level person to run the district here. And then now we're taking our $30 to $40 million entity budget per year, and this is a very small amount of that budget to figure out what we're going to do the next 5 years, 10 years. So we're talking a lot of money here, you know, $500 million worth of planning and entity of projects that we're spending on, and power that we're buying, and water that we're pumping. So this is a small fraction to figure out where we're going to go with all of that, and how we can provide services to this community, which they want in today's situation of COVID and working from home and internet communication, et cetera, and safety.
Tell us how you really feel.
Right, I got to get it out. You know, it's just like and we need to figure this out. And having these specific metrics is just, it's incredible. The benefit, the cost to benefit ratio is, I guess hearing that email, it's like, wow, there's a significant portion of value that is missing from that component, and that's why I'm going to vote yes for this contract, because the benefits are hundreds of millions of dollars that we're going to figure out and provide to this community and add value.
I'm going to add my 2 cents. I'm just going to sort of...
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like our last project with Pam came in on time and under budget with an excellent outcome.
Can you speak up?
Usually, I said our last contract with Pam, we came in on time, we came in under budget, and we got an excellent result. And usually when I hire someone and that is the result, I hire them again. It's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple way. So, yeah, I do echo Jeff. I can go into a lot more detail with that. But I think strategic planning is not something to take lightly. I think it is something that is existentially important at this point, to be honest with you. I think we are seeing, again, we are in a tenuous position right now in this world, in our communities, and our future is something that we really need to plan to meet the challenges of, and you cannot overvalue that. And guidance cannot be, we need it. I need it. I'm going to say that. I need it. I need to learn how to think in these ways and to unlock, the potential that we have and do it thoroughly with feedback from the community in partnership. And I don't think we can value that enough. So I also am planning on voting yes.
Does anyone have another 25 cents?
Yeah, I do. No, I just want to, also sort of add my support. I mean, I appreciate, Rem, the fact that, yes, you do have yourself and qualified staff on board to throw together something and say we did it. But that's not what this board wants. And that's not what this community needs. We are striving to be the best. We strive to be the best in hiring Rem, and we did. We got the results we wanted, and we're striving to be the best in developing this strategic plan. And, we have professionals on staff. Let them do their jobs of running a water and electric utility. Let them focus on services that this community needs. And let's, as a board, with Pam's support, do the heavy lifting and get this thing going, and really start embracing all of these components we've worked so hard over the last year and a half to develop and bring these to the community. I do appreciate that we have good staff and they can do this job, but that's not what we want them, and that's not what we need them to do right now. And so strategic plans they're tough because they can be tough conversations, and you need a solid facilitator who who is outside of the organization to guide, to to right the ship when it's going one way or the other, to bring people together, to bring groups together, to facilitate. That's what's needed, and that's what we're paying for. And it's hugely valuable to have that person and have that organization to steer that ship while the board and staff can do their jobs, and jump in and help as needed and as directed. So I fully support moving forward with this contract.
Did public input? Any other last thoughts? Okay. Is there a motion?
I do make a motion to authorize our general manager to execute a contract and all necessary agreements with Pamela First Associates for strategic planning.
I'll second. Can we have roll call, please, Shelley?
Thank you, Mr. President. Director Loliotis,
Yes.
Yes.
Director Aguirre,
Yes.
Vice President Finn,
Yes.
President Bender.
Yes,
The motion passes 5-0.
thank you.
And
Thank you, Gordon.
my yes was about what, Tony said.
I'm sorry, Joe, what?
Yes, was based on a lot of what Tony said. I talked to Rem this afternoon, and we're involving a lot of other people in this project. A lot of districts are all coming in, the community, and there's gonna be quite an involvement. Now, I know that our general manager and our staff can handle that. Like I told you that, didn't I?
Yes, sir.
And then, but like Tony said, this is bigger than both of us. That's it.
Thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mike,
Mike,
number 15.
Tough act to follow.
And we're here today to talk about numbers. They're exciting too. Right.
in your own special way.
45-minute presentation.
Let her rip.
Can we take a 5-minute break?
Oh, what? Oh my gosh, yes. Mike, do you mind?
I don't want to blow up.
Do not.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Communication. 5-minute break, let's take 5.
Okay, so, Mr. President, we'll return at,
Oh, that's math.
yeah, sorry,
8:13.
8:13. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I've had 2 of those.
We're
Oh,
live?
there we go. We're live. Tony, are you back?
Let me just check the number real quick.
I'm here.
All right, awesome. Mike, you're good to go.
What do we have, Steve?
Oh, Steve Gross.
He's on.
Okay, he's on.
I'm here. Thanks.
Okay, good evening, President Pender and members of the board. Mike Salmon, Director of Finance, CFO for Truckee PUD. And this item is workshop item number 15, Financial Performance 2020 Mid-Year Review of the district's financials. Just a little background information. First, the fiscal year 2021 budget was approved November 6, 2019. The district code requires a semi-annual review, budget report comparison to actuals. There's a mid-year review tonight, and then we'll do a year-end for year-end 2020 and review in March of 2021, right before the audit, during the audit.
Right in the thick of it.
A little bit more background information. This is the approved budget for 2020 at a summary level for electric, water, and total revenues right at 41 million. Total operating costs of 33 million. This presentation, I should mention, is a fairly high-level briefing of the financial performance year-to-date June, as well as some annual forecasting for 2020. The detail in your board packets is much more detailed financial information, both from a P&L and income statement, as well as balance sheets, water, electric, summary balance sheet, as well as detailed balance sheets, summary P&Ls, as well as detailed P&Ls. Feel free at any time to shoot me an email or give me a call if the board has questions on those details before or after this meeting. Anytime, I'm happy to try and answer a question if you had a detailed question. Of course, I can try and answer it tonight as well if you have a question. But you guys hopefully all have my email. So performance, we talked a little bit about performance in one of the previous agenda items for electric. Revenues are pacing ahead of budget through June, favorably 2% or $340,000. And that is driven in part by, primarily just by volume of billable hours at a consolidated level being slightly higher than budget. Budget did anticipate the rate change for 2020, so that's not part of this equation. We did see a dip in demand. About 90% of our electric customers are residential and 10% commercial, and we saw a dip in all consumption for electric in March, but things kind of very large dip in March, but after that it's kind of stabilized and it's down a little bit in April, and then June and July, which are not, sorry, June's in here, July's not, and August all saw upticks in KWH for reference purposes. Expenses are underrunning, which was mentioned earlier. That the primary driver of that is the cost of purchased power is down about 8% compared to last year, which is close to compared to budget. Revenues, I did take a good detailed look at the spread of revenues for electric and water between the first half of the year and the second half of the year, and based on that analysis, forecasting revenues almost at $28 million, which will, for the year, which will be $1 million ahead of budget for the year, particularly if demand continues, which for September and October, which I'm anticipating right now. So on the revenue side, we're going to be favorable to the current forecast. We're underrunning the expenses, in particular purchase power, as I discussed. Forecasting for the year, $23.4 million, favorable still $550,000 the budget, and that's including the uptick for wildfire defensible space that was approved earlier in the meeting today. So net impact is electric favorable $1.5 million in operating. Very good news.
Yeah.
Some other aspects of the financials of electric are debt service, capital projects, and a transfer. The budget includes approval of debt service, obviously to pay down our debt. There's only one piece of debt on electric's books, the portion of the pension obligation bonds, and that's obviously on budget. Capital projects, next slide covers that a little bit more detail, but they are underrunning the budgeted amount for the year, and will come under for the year. The transfer is the transfer in the budget. There was a $208,000 transfer approved to the vehicle reserve fund, and that has been done. Capital expenditures for electric are quite a few items. The largest is building improvements, particularly for the main district headquarters here, as well as meters and transformers and pole change outs, and then the continued work on the SCADA. And then you heard earlier mention of the Northwoods pole rebuild project, improvement project on Northwoods between Chamonix and Mulebach. Moving on to water. Water is underrunning through June, and revenues took a deeper dive into that. And the budget is spread evenly over 12 months. Take the annual revenue and divide by 12, whereas the water revenues do not spread evenly like that. Obviously, in the summer months, it's greater water revenues. So I am anticipating revenues for water to be forecasting them to be flat to budget at $13.8 million. On the cost side, current costs are underrunning about $400,000, 8%, and I'm currently forecasting I looked at the spread on expenses for water as well, and their expenses are going to underrun a little bit here for the rest of this year. So I'm anticipating, opposite, they overrun a little bit in the summer, so we're going to eat into the savings a little bit. I'm anticipating $9.3 million in forecasted for the year in water, which puts in $200,000 favorable in expenses. So about $200,000 favorable for the year for the water operation, water division. Other aspects of water, they do have a fair amount of debt, and that's obviously running to budget halfway through the year with debt payments and interest and principal. Capital projects on a straight line basis are running even with budget, and then a vehicle reserve transfer and budget was approved and has been done for $175,000. There was another notable in water, kind of below the line, below your typical operations. There has been currently year-to-date June, there's a gain on disposal of $249,000, and that is the disposal of, in particular, 2 pieces of land, Rocky Lane and MacGyver Hill. I'm sure the board's aware of those transactions. So those are favorable P&L activities that will reflect on the bottom line of water, go back into water's reserves, if you will. And then we sold for a net gain about $20,000 net gain on the Mud Dog, whatever that type of equipment is. I'm not sure exactly what a Mud Dog is. Joe, remember what a Mud Dog is? What's that?
Is it a backer truck?
I've heard water. It may be in
the little one, the little snuffalo.
Brian's in there next, so we'll hit him up with a Mud Dog. As far as capital expenditures year to date, 1.1 million. The budget is 2.4 million. The current expenditures year to date June are 264,000 in meters, 614,000 in SCADA related to the water IT infrastructure specific to water. Moving from water and electric specific to some other key financial information, key debt balances. Debt a year ago at this time, a year ago in June, was 22.8 million. It is now 19.7 million for a decrease of 1.3 million. So we're paying down our debt, which is normal, and that's what we do. We plan. The year-to-year change for the year, year-end December last year, 2019, to year-end this year, 2020, will be a reduction of 15% or 3.2 million. Those are the planned debt payments as listed here on this page. So our debt balance, key debt balances will be just under 18 million when we close out the year. The one thing I did want to mention is one of our district code requirements is a debt service, maximum of debt service in relation to revenues of 25% or less. And we're currently, for 2020, the approved budget is 23.5. So it's close to that pressing point, threshold, if you will, but it's not at it. And then that last loan, the DWR Prop 55 loan for water, that gets paid down over the next year and a half. And so that's about to come off our books, which is a good chunk of change. So in 2020, we will pay down 300,000 in debt service, and then we'll only have 151,000 to go in 2021. That frees up that ratio a fair amount, and we'll get into that a little bit more later, if you would like. Another item, General Manager Rem did mention past due accounts, and the balance is $236,000. 83,000 of that is 90 days plus. A year ago, this is moving from June to kind of more current data. It's currently through August, 83,000 and 90 days plus. Last year at this time it was 13,000. So we've definitely seen an impact in past due. We still plan to collect the majority of that. We have customer relief that Rem had mentioned as well, and we still have funds available in that. So we continue to promote and encourage customers to take advantage of that. My estimate for the 90-day plus is going to grow to about between 100 and 120,000 range by the end of the year, and hopefully as the pandemic recedes and we get back to more normal life, hopefully that number will come back down. far as fiscal impact, this is a district code item for the board to review semi-annually the financial performance. And the recommendation is to receive this report and provide any comments. Ask any questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll get back to you. We can agendize something for next month.
Got it. Thank you, Mike. Krista, any initial thoughts on the numbers workshop?
I'm glad to see some of our revenues are up and our debt is being paid down, and generally these are not things that I am super adept at wading through. I would defer to Bob.
Joe.
Hey, I kind of missed the part that, I think you told us that we're under budget or over budget?
Depends on whether you're talking about revenues or expenses,
Yeah.
whether you're talking about
Exactly.
whether you're talking about water or electric. But big picture, we're about flat in revenues through June and under in expenses, a good chunk of change. And so the net effect is favorable, about 1.5 million in operating. Is forecast for the year.
On the electric side, we're a little under budget then.
Electric is under in expenses and over in revenues. So good and good.
We're favorable above.
Favorable.
That's what I want to hear. And I missed it when you came through that. And on the water, we're about the same?
Water's a little behind through June in revenues, but they're going to make that up through the course of the rest of the summer.
Is that why some people aren't paying, because they're not paying their bills?
Unrelated to that, completely unrelated to that.
Okay.
Yep. So we still we still charge and bill our customers.
Yeah.
And then that creates accounts receivable.
Yeah.
And then if they don't pay, that becomes, it remains an accounts receivable. And then when they pay, we put the money in the bank and reduce the
That's
due.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
So some of that, Joe, is the fact that water rates are cyclical.
Yeah.
So third quarter, generally, we see a higher performance because that's when greater demand exists.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we'll see a certain amount of revenue recovery in the third quarter.
Good.
Yep.
And expenditures are under budget.
Bob?
When I was looking at those reports, the electric debt is about 1/5 of the water debt. Is that correct? Water debt's 5 times what the electric debt is?
Sounds about all right.
Wow. Director, what a difference.
Yes. Very little debt on the electric side.
Correct. I remember when we saw those projections a month or two ago, whatever they were, and it looks like we're going to be spending a lot of money on the water side in the future, from what I understand. Is that correct, Brett?
It depends. It depends on how aggressive Bob would want to be, right? I mean, I think the next topic is going to be, is going to illuminate that a little bit more in terms of, Far West is saying that they're recommending $7 million annually in terms of capital. We can do that on rates, but, there's a percentage increase there that is, I would say, stiff. But there is inside those models in the next item, there is a way to dip our toe in the water, maintain our reserves, and move up without having cataclysmic rate changes. That is correct. Right. So we want, and I think that's where
There's a balance, yeah, we have to work on that.
Exactly.
Okay. I just didn't see the difference between those numbers before. Now I just saw it, and I'm like, wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Good report.
Tony, you're up.
No comments. Thanks for the update. I will say I did not read all 34 pages of your financial statements, but I appreciate them being included in the board packet.
Shauna, any public input on the numbers?
No, Mr. President, we do not have any policy.
Okay. Yeah, very thorough. Really appreciate that. I like the little touches with the greens and reds and highlights on some things. Just a lot of information, small numbers, but good to have those highlights and good to have in the meat and potatoes, the bulk of the data in there, in the report. So really appreciate that, and then excellent summary. So a lot of work went into this. Really appreciate that.
I put a lot of work in this report.
I also want to say thank you. I may not be adept at it, but I try, and I do put time into it, and I appreciate the time that you put into it for us.
Just got to start reading.
Help make it clear.
Yeah. And then,
It's a lot nicer when they're favorable reports.
right, yeah, right. That makes
Our job a little easier.
a lot. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Great. I think stay on track.
All right.
Carry on.
All right. Thank you very much.
So that takes us to workshop item number 16. Here comes Brian.
Here he is.
Water rate study. The famous smiley face. Right, or we hope, right.
The last one, right?
Yeah.
You have to come back.
Right, or it was a smirk.
All right. Good evening, President Bender, members of the board. This is a workshop item number 16 for the 2020 water rate study. I have with us this evening, some of you are familiar with him, Sean Korn with HDR Engineering, who will be assisting with the presentation.
Hey, there he is.
Good evening, Sean.
I don't think we've ever met, Sean.
Just for logistical issues, am I turning the volume
Oh, yeah,
on this one or not?
that's
Okay.
Oh, I guess that's okay.
I will share the screen here to kick this off.
Upper screen.
Thanks.
All right, so I would like to kind of start off with some background as to the purpose for this evening's presentation. Again, this is a workshop item, so there is no direct action out of this workshop this evening, but we are hoping to receive some feedback and direction from the board on how to continue or direction to frame the next steps in the process. To provide a little bit of background and kind of some perspective on where we're starting, as you may recall, in 2015 was the last time we went through the process of setting rates for the district's water utility. Board did that, and by adopting ordinance 2015-01, you may recall that was to set a 5-year rate schedule with a maximum increase for each of those years, and then each of those years the board would convene to adopt a rate not to exceed any of these percentages. So we're at that point again. That rate schedule expires in 2020, and so for 2021 and beyond, we are here to start that process with this workshop to set those rates. Just for kind of refocusing on kind of how the process lays out for the water utility rates, California Prop 218, also known as the Right to Vote on Taxes Act, became effective back in '97, and this basically is a proposition that sets the procedural requirements for a government or a public agency to set potable water rates. So water in the state of California is considered a property-related fee, and so that's why that rate is subject to this process. Some of the procedural requirements that Sean will get into in his presentation, just kind of going over real quickly here, the rates need to be reasonable, proportional, cost-based. There is a notification process that we'll get into here in the workshop, and then there's a public hearing that we will schedule in the future, or the board will schedule in the future months here to finalize that process. little bit of background in preparation for this process. As you may recall, the district did enter into a professional service contract with 2 agencies. The first one being Far West Engineering. In your earlier presentations, I heard some discussions on Far West. They helped assist the district in establishing a 10-year capital improvement plan for the water utility. We did review that back on May 20th of this year in an open session item here with the board. And then utilizing that CIP, we've also entered into a contract agreement with HDR Engineering to conduct the 2020 water utility rate study. As you may recall, the CIP covered a lot of items, and there was a lot to review there in those open sessions with the board. It was presented on May 20th. It provided a 10-year outlook for capital investments on the water utility side. Some of the key takeaways from the CIP were to harden emergency power supplies, i.e. generators, for the pumping facilities here at the district and the well facilities. Establish some new water pipelines for system redundancy, reliability, and the outlook, the cost for repair and replacement of aging infrastructure. The CIP identified a $10 million a year capital investment budget, and we'll discuss that, how that relates to rates here with Sean's presentation.
10 million, 7 million.
It was a $7 million a year recommended to achieve the 10-year plan.
Right.
And then HDR Engineering, we're going to bring Sean on board here in a moment. The goals or the scope of work there was to conduct a cost of service analysis, utilize the updated CIP, and address some of the concerns the district had with some of the unfunded mandates we expect to come out later this year and the subsequent years, address some of the continuing rise in costs, and evaluate our rate structure as a whole. So with that, I would like to hand this over to Sean Korn with HDR Engineering. I'm going to close my screen and Sean will share his, and we'll go through the presentation. Sean, take it away.
Thank you, Brian. President Bender, directors, appreciate the opportunity to see you all again. It's been a couple of years, so it's good to see your faces again as we go through this process. Let me get this to screen show. Are you seeing the big picture or the small picture?
Small.
All right, let me switch this a minute. I will just share this way. That better?
No, we're still seeing the split screen.
Doggone it.
You're in a presentation. Go to somebody got to run it.
All right, I apologize here. Let me try this again.
Ryan, while we're waiting, will we be looking at a schedule similar to this?
Yes.
3% every year? You don't know yet.
Sorry, I didn't get it.
We don't know yet, Joe. We're here to talk.
There you go,
a little bit
Sean.
about
You got it, Sean.
That's how it works.
where you want us to be, or kind of how you want us to move into that.
No, that's okay. You're supposed to proceed here.
Okay, good evening. I'll try this again. So this evening, as Brian mentioned, we have the start of the water rate study update. We are past the 50% line. As we've gone through this process, we've developed all three of the analyses that I'll talk about here as part of the rate study process. But we do have a key area of discussion and policy decision to make as we go through the rate study. So as I go through this, I will touch briefly on the purpose of the cost of service study, a slide on the rate setting process, and then we'll review the results of the water revenue requirement, that first step of the comprehensive study, and gain some feedback from the board on the different scenarios that we'll walk through. And as has been alluded to with the Far West plan or something different of a capital improvement plan for that. I'll stop there to get any feedback or comments as we go through this and discuss that capital plan, and then I'll close off with an overview of cost of service and the importance of that analysis to meet the requirements of Proposition 218, and then also talk a little bit about the current rate structures and gain any feedback from the board on anything you've heard in the community as far as the water rate structure is concerned, any changes or items that you'd like addressed as part of the study, and then we'll finish off with the next steps. So really the purpose of this rate study is to develop and propose rates that provide a sufficient level of revenues to operate, maintain, repair, and improve the district's water system. And that's our goal as we go through this first step, the revenue requirement component, to develop a capital plan so that the district is adequately funding renewal and replacements, maintaining the system, and providing and meeting the operating needs of the system on an ongoing basis over this next 5-year period. We then move into the cost of service analysis, which develops the equitable and proportional and cost-based rates. That's the key to meeting our Prop 218 requirement so that each customer class is paying their equitable share of those costs as we go through this. Now, as we go through this, we base this on generally accepted methodologies, but they're tailored specific to the district's water system and customer and demographic characteristics. So this is key to the analysis. It's very similar in the same approach that we've done in the past for the district, but we want to make sure that we're taking those generally accepted approaches, what's happening in the industry today, and how we're moving forward with water rates and the process of establishing those. And one of those key issues you talked about a few minutes ago, from a financial planning criteria perspective, we want to make sure that we're meeting those targets that the board has set forward for the district for the water utility. One of those is maintaining that target debt service coverage ratio. So again, that's that credit check for the water utility if additional debt were to be issued, that you have the sufficient funds to repay that over time. You have those targets built in. We have that included in our overall analysis, and when we come back with fine-tuned numbers, that'll be a piece that we'll talk about. We also want to make sure that there's adequate funding for capital, and that's the primary discussion that we'll be having today, is looking at those different capital funding levels and what that accomplishes and does that meet the district's goals. And this goes back to the prior rate study. I think most of you were there. And when we talked about that study, the goal was main replacements and increasing revenues to get to those levels of main replacement that the district was targeting at that point in time. So as we look at that capital plan, that's what we have to evaluate and discuss as part of that. And then also meeting the target reserve balances. I heard President Bender, the smiley face slide, right? We want to make sure that we meet those goals and objectives that you've laid out there for the utility. So as we go through this, it is a 3-step process: the revenue requirement, cost of service, and rate design. I've hit on each of these. A simple explanation is the revenue requirement is the size of the pie. So how much bigger does the pie need to get each year to adequately fund those operating and capital needs to maintain, repair the system on an ongoing basis? The cost of service analysis then cuts that pie into pieces based on how each customer class proportionally uses the system. So residential and non-residential is the example. How do they use the system? What are their customer characteristics that drive the design and operation of your water system so that we can develop cost-based, equitable, and proportional rates? We take the information from the first 2 steps, so the overall size of the pie and how those pieces of pie are split up, and we develop rates around those. And so really what happens is, coming out of that cost of service, we get unit costs. And those unit costs become the rates for the meter charge and the consumption charge for year 1. So each time you go through this process, this first year of the rate study can be a reset year where we get everything back in line. It reflects the cost of service. We adjust proportionally for the years 2 through 5, and then you reset and make sure that your customer characteristics haven't changed and you don't have those issues of cost of service, and we can continue on. So I'll start off with the revenue requirement. I've mentioned some of these already, but really what we're looking at is the level of rate adjustment necessary to fund the operating and capital needs of the utility. We want to make sure that we're meeting those prudent financial criteria. We do look out over a long-term period. We look out over that 10-year period, but we're really focused on that next 5 years for the rate setting period. We want to look out long enough so that we can see anything coming up in the future that we need to plan for today. So if we do look at our capital plan and we have major projects in year 7 or 8, we want to make sure rates are set at an adequate level in years 1 through 5 so that we don't have that rate shock or huge customer impacts from a rate setting perspective in those years. We also analyze this on a standalone basis. So very similar to how we've done this in the past, we want to make sure that water rates pay water costs. So the revenues equal the costs, just very similar to your budgeting process. We want to make sure that we tie those out as we go forward. There's no funding from other district funds, such as electric, supporting costs in the water utility. And we use what's called the cash basis. This is the same methodology the district has used in all the past studies, and it really just mentions the fact that we look at it on an annual basis, year by year. So we add up the revenues and the expenses, and what are those changes needed in that year, and that's a simple explanation of that cash basis approach. So some of the key assumptions of the revenue requirement, we started with the fiscal year 20 and 21 budget. Those are our first 2 years. And then for years 2022 through 2030, then we developed a projection of expenses using approximately a 3% annual inflationary factor. That ties pretty nicely to what the district has used in the past. It also reflects what the district's seen in some of those inflationary costs going forward. We do also take an independent look at the rate revenues. So you talked about that at the prior item. What we do is we take each of the customer class characteristics, number of meters by size, amount of consumption billed, and we calculate what those revenues are. And we need to do that in a comprehensive cost of service study so that the revenues and the revenue requirement are used all the way through the rate design process, and those billable units, number of customers by meter size, and consumption are used in the distribution factors to equitably and proportionally allocate those costs. So we calculate that, we compare that back to the district's calculations to make sure that we're close to that. It's not always exact, but we want to make sure we're reflective of current revenue levels. Going forward, we've included an assumed annual customer growth of 1%. So 1% new customers each year going forward. This next bullet is really what we want to talk about tonight. And that's really getting back to the different capital scenarios. And so the Far West study was mentioned. It laid out the 10-year capital plan, and that was approximately $7 million a year. The scenario, that's scenario 3. Scenario 2 is a medium level of capital funding. That runs at approximately $4 million a year, and I've got these noted as we go into the other slides. And it shows, and it results in that $4 million, which is really close to what we looked at back in the 2015 study. So we were trying to ramp up and almost got up to that $4 million a year level. Scenario 1, the baseline, maintain the current planned adjustment, so that gets back to the long-term projection of approximately inflationary increases of 3%, runs at about $3 million a year. So as we went through this process, we developed each of these scenarios. We did not issue any new debt. We're rate funding all of these capital improvements for each of these scenarios on an annual basis. So as you think about this, you know, as we move from 3 million to 4 million to 7 million, then that has an impact on rates because we are rate funding them and not assuming any additional long-term borrowing. So for each of those scenarios, we then developed a rate transition plan to adequately fund the operating and capital needs of each of those scenarios. This slide shows just a quick summary of the different capital plan scenarios. So scenario 1 is our 3.4 million a year, so a total of 34 million over the 10-year period. That is the orange bar or the first bar to the left in each of those years. Scenario 2 averages 4.3 over the time period for a total of 43 million. Scenario, which is the blue bar or the middle bar for each year. And scenario 3 averages 7.2 million or 72 million over the time period. So you can see how those are phased in. The orange and blue bars, you can see how they've increased out over time. That was to transition our rate funding as we go through time to get up to adequately funding those levels on a pay-as-you-go basis or a rate-funded approach. So as we went through this, we developed the total scenarios. And as we look at the revenue requirement, there's 4 different components. There's our annual O&M expenses. There's our annual debt service. There is our transfers, which in the case of the district, the transfers are really money coming in to fund some of the debt that is on the books from the facility fee fund, as an example, as well as funding an equipment replacement fund as part of that. And then we have our rate-funded capital. So each of these bars reflects the rate-funded capital level that we're looking at in each year for each of the scenarios. So looking at that revenue requirement summary, we've got our 3 scenarios. These are combined. The orange or the first part of the bar is our O&M, our transfers, and our existing debt service. So that gives us our full operating, excluding capital. The next set of bars for scenario 1 is the red piece. So that brings us up to the total revenue requirement, runs about 13 million in 2020. That gets all the way up to 18.9 million by 2030. Again, we're looking long term. The focus for the rates is fiscal year 21 through fiscal year 25 as part of this. Scenario 2 is the orange plus the red plus the purple. So it picks up that total amount. So the purple really represents the difference between scenario 1 and scenario 2. You can see that that moves up to 20.3 million, so an increase of about $1 million, just shy of $1.5 million. Scenario 3, the $7 million annual capital target, is the blue, so that moves up to 22.4 million, so another $2.1 million of revenue requirement as part of that. Now, to fund this on a pay-as-you-go basis through annual rates, the scenario 1, the $3 million capital plan, the baseline scenario, runs at 3% a year and then 2.5% in the out years. Scenario 2, the $4 million capital plan on average, annual average, is 5% a year. And then the $7 million capital, scenario 3, we have a couple of years of 15%. So this is what was alluded to earlier. When we jump up that fast, you can see jumping from 20 to 21 up in the chart, we've got a pretty big jump there to make. That requires some larger rate increases in the early years, and then those taper off in the out years as part of that. Now, the famous smiley face slide, this is what we really look at, is how does this impact a couple of our key components? One is the rates, the percentages that we just looked at. The second is the reserve funds. The darker shaded piece, if you can hopefully see that, it runs just about at 9.5 million in 21, increasing to just about 12, 13 million by 2030. That's based on the district's target reserve balances for all of the reserves. So that's the operating cash, that's the facility fee reserve, all of the separate different funds that you have as part of that included in here. That's the goal. So thinking back to 2015, this is where we had that smiley face, kind of like the blue line on scenario 3, where we start low and we bring it right back up. Scenario 1, and this I should mention, includes the proposed rate adjustments, revenue adjustments from the prior slide. So this is built into this chart. Scenario 1 keeps revenues flat. So that 3% a year, 3 and 2.5% a year, we don't build reserves up back to where they are targeted to be as we go out through this time period. Scenario 2, with the increased capital, approximately $1 million more per year of funding, we're also able to increase our overall reserve levels And by the time we get out to 2027, we meet our minimum target, and then it just grows slightly over those last couple of years as part of this. And then scenario 3, we start lower. We do use significant amount of reserves. We draw that down, you can see, to about just below $2 million a year, and then that increases over time. And again, those are with those proposed adjustments for scenario 3, which would be 15% for the first 2 years. So that increase in capital has a significant impact. But again, as we look at this, very similar to what we've talked about in the past on the goals and objectives of funding those capital improvement needs over time and targeting that right mix for the board on how we get all those improvements done over time. So what does this look like to your typical customer? This is, again, the average customer bill for 2020 based on a 3/4 inch meter and 5,000 gallons per month. So that's about the average customer on the district system. And so what that bill is today is $73.56. Applying the percentages from a couple slides back equally to these current rate or average bill impacts, we can calculate what those future bill impacts may be. Now, it's important to note this is before any customer bill, before any necessary cost of service adjustments or rate design revisions. So this is just taking what you have in place today and increasing it by those proposed percentages. So you can see in scenario 1, the $3 million baseline for capital, we increase fairly steadily at about $2 per month per year. When we go to the scenario 2, a couple more dollars per month, about $4 per month, just under as we go out. And then we have a large jump in scenario 3 in the first 2 years, and then that smooths out over the subsequent 3 years through the 5-year rate setting period. So just to give you an upfront look at how do you compare to some of the other folks based on those proposed adjustments for fiscal year 21, again, using that same average customer bill. The first bar, the green bar, that's the average of all the other districts that we looked at. And that's the dark blue bars on the right-hand side. So we have Tahoe City PUD, North Tahoe PUD, Squaw Valley, North Star, South Tahoe, and Alpine Springs. And those are bills calculated based on their rate structures with a residential customer with a 3/4 inch meter and 5,000 gallons per month. So when we look at what their rates would, what bill would result from their rates, that's the blue bars. The gray bar is where you're at today. The red is scenario, or orange is scenario 1. The purple is scenario 2, so a slight increase. And then scenario 3 is a little bit bigger increase. But again, all within many of your other similar districts in the Tahoe region. So with that, I'll stop and take any questions or comments on the revenue requirement piece, and then I'll finish up with the cost of service and rate design after getting any feedback. And I can leave this up if you'd like, or I can take it down if you want to see any of the specific slides.
Great, thank you, Sean. Any initial thoughts, Krista? Not to put you on the spot, just.
Right. Well, there's a lot of, to have. We have improvements that we have to accomplish. Can't just let pipes deteriorate. And I am actually very uncomfortable with scenario 1, because I feel like we're just waiting for a disaster to happen. We have to address these things. It seems like scenario 2 is not quite a midpoint between scenario 1 and scenario 3. It's closer to a scenario 1. Were these chosen specifically for a reason, or was it just like, we'll just choose these numbers, in my mind I would go, okay, here's one, here's the other, and then I choose the midpoint. Was there a reason that we chose something that was less aggressive than midpoint for the midpoint?
Yeah, it's a great question. The staff wanted to present to the board, obviously, the baseline, just carrying everything out, what that looks like. The aggressive approach was to address the 10-year CIP in the next rate schedule and just illustrate what that looks like in terms of, rate increases. The scenario 2 is not in the midpoint. It's a modest increase, making sure that we're somehow, how do we, construct this rate design so that the increases are modest in terms of the impact on the customer year over year. But it also puts the district in a financial position to address the critical components of that 10-year CIP. So obviously, some of the items identified in the CIP will have to be pushed out or funded in other ways. But it puts the district in a position where we can at least prioritize that 10-year CIP plan, find the most critical components to it, and then build the reserves. And as you may recall, back in 2015, the rate design was, a lot of discussion was to make sure that the district maintained minimum reserve balances and get us through the drop in consumption through the drought. And so we were trying to maintain and carry out our capital improvement plan, which at the time was somewhere in the $2.5–2 million a year. Make sure we maintain at least minimum reserves and carry that rate structure through the next 5 years and the emergency drought regulations. We've done that. The board, staff, the district has followed through on that. We've delivered on that, and we've positioned ourselves exactly where those discussions led to is in 2021. Where do we want to build those reserves beyond that and start really addressing some of the items identified in those CIP plans? So now we have an updated CIP. We have a couple different scenarios. This is for workshop purposes. It doesn't necessarily mean we can't present in the next session something in between that $4 million and $7 million. But staff saw that the incremental increases year over year were modest enough where it wasn't a significant impact to our ratepayers, but enough that we actually can move the line on those reserve balances in CIP.
Okay, so we get it's enough to make progress on the projects that we need to accomplish while still maintaining our reserve goals.
Then it really, again, puts us, after this, we're assuming that this presentation is based on another 5-year rate design.
Right.
It puts us in the district in position, again, financially, to continue to build those reserves in the next cycle as well.
Okay, I'm going to hand off for a moment. And let another director ask a question.
You yield your time.
I yield
At the moment.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. Joe, do you want me to do my 2 cents then first?
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay. I guess, just looking back at all this, it's not, 5 years ago, I just feel like we've just been playing catch up, looking back. We had this rate study, we studied our numbers, we had a different capital improvement plan, and just looking back, I feel like just the water department is always behind. We're never in front of the wave. The electric department, different story, we're always in front. There's cap and trade and all this stuff. And, water, just like tonight, Mike Salmon comes in and says, we're $200,000 favorable. And it's just like, well, there's so many projects. I mean, Taladana is backfilled with rocks in the 70s. It's just, so, and I just feel like scenario 1 is like, no way. Okay, that's just, we're going to get hammered with the tidal wave. And then scenario 2 is like, okay, we're getting there, but I feel like we just did that 5 years ago. And here we are looking back going, wow, we're still behind. And now we have an even more intensive capital improvement plan with tanks and backups, and what if this fails? We need another connection here. That original capital improvement plan didn't have that in there. And I just feel like we're just not getting ahead. So my initial thought is we're somewhere between scenario 2 and 3. Because scenario 2 is like the bare minimum to me. That's just like, okay, that's what we'll just repeat what we did 5 years ago. And then, but where we are right now, looking back at these upcoming projects and still being behind, I don't like that feeling. We need to somehow get ahead of the curve and finally get our reserves, like we've been talking about this for 12 years. For years.
Last 5 years, okay, scenario 2, Canada like the minimum, right, for us. And that's why
That's
we're
where I'm
always
at.
behind, because it's always, the minimum. We don't play catch up. We just
Right,
do what we have to do to survive with it.
right, and
And
we're
that's
talking
why
about it,
every 5 years, we're in the same boat.
yeah.
But, okay, now I know the difference.
Okay, but.
If we raise the rate up,
Well,
I mean,
scenario
we
3
can't do that
coupled with,
because the rates are.
Yeah.
well, scenario 3 coupled with coronavirus, it's just like, okay, that's like
Also a
painful.
no, yeah.
Yeah, you know, but then we are really talking about, you know, if you just look at those numbers on one of the other slides, it's $9, scenario 3, I think, per
But
month.
that's
Mhm.
Over the
You know,
5-year period, it's about, yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, so it's 73.56 to a jump of 84.59. So, you know, rather than looking at just the quote percentages, let's actually think about the actual dollar value. It's $10. I mean, that's a beer at a bar in downtown Truckee.
Okay, but let's take a look. Jeff, let me intercede here for a second. Brian, where were we 5 years ago with our debt and, you know, the condition of the system versus where we are today?
So if I understand your question correctly, in terms of the system, during the last 5-year rate cycle, our capital investments were heavily weighted in main leak repair and replacements and some of our mainline replacement projects. In terms of debt, I don't have the exact numbers for you in terms of where we were 5 years ago. As you saw in Mr. Salmon's presentation just before this, the water is approaching payoff on some of those debt services in the next 2 to 3 years.
But our debt was higher 5 years ago.
Yes.
On the water side. And I'm just talking the water side here.
Right.
But we have addressed, we have improved, our system, is more efficient now, correct?
We have reduced water loss significantly over the last.
Okay, so we have made strides, Jeff.
Right, we have,
I'm just trying
Right.
to put it in perspective here. So we have made strides, but we're not 100%.
right, it's like, how long are we gonna drag this out? You know,
And I agree with you.
Right, 20 years, it's just like, oh my God, you know, I'm gonna
years
be.
for me.
Yeah. Joe's like, no.
The same thing. Every year, the water department's always dragging behind.
Right, and no offense, Brian, right, okay?
Because we don't, because we
Give my
don't
friend.
vote for the high rate. We pay the minimum we possibly can.
Right.
And it looks good and it feels good, but, yeah, in the long run, we're still.
Well, and now we have an updated capital improvement plan.
I
And
think we were all back on our heels when he presented that at the last
That
meeting.
was-
We were all
yeah,
like,
like-
$7 million this year, holy smokes.
big wake-up call.
Yeah.
Let me offer some comments here. All really good comments. Thanks, board members. I'm on the same page with Jeff and Krista that I think I'm comfortable somewhere between scenario 2 and 3. But I want to go back and make sure we kind of think about the history of where we're at. I mean, we have seen capital plans many, many years ago, in a water master plan that Neil Kaufman put together. And I'll argue that a lot of these projects were in there. But we never aggressively approached really addressing the the nuts and bolts of those original capital plans. We kind of chased the shiny objects, which were pipelines that were spewing water and tearing up roads. And that's where we spent our money, which is fine. It's paid off. We've reduced our water usage, and our conservation numbers look good. I mean, so we've made progress for sure, but there is still a lot of fundamental capital improvements that are needed that we never pushed to fund and get accomplished. And that's what this capital plan that Far West put together, this master plan, has, just brought again to the forefront of this discussion, and, really emphasized not the shiny object, not the leaky pipes, but really the nuts and bolts of the water system, tanks, more storage, more fire flow, redundancies, ability to operate during wildfires and power outages. So really some really core fundamental projects that, that I won't say we've ignored, we've just never pushed to fund. We spent money where it was more visible, and that's with pipelines and leaks. So my preference is somewhere between scenarios 2 and 3, because I really think we need to start heading down another road of capital improvements to address some of these issues that the current master plan has pointed out, which are storage, redundancies, fire flows, things like that.
And past master plans. I really appreciate you bringing that up. It's been there. We chose not to get that, like you said, the nuts and bolts, those tough projects.
You're referring to the 2012 facilities master plan?
Yes. I'm assuming that's what Tony is also.
I think we're probably all in agreement that we want to be between 2 and 3, and one thing that, if we front load the increase and then gradually reduce it, in reality, the district's going to be making more money quicker, so we can attack some of these projects, because that makes more sense. But I think that might be the way to do it.
I think I thought the same, whether you put it on the front, you put it in the back.
Well, if you put it on the front,
there's a compounding activity.
It's a mathematical compound.
Yeah. So if we did a couple of years on the front end with a few more percentage points to start to initiate, Sean, will you bring up the curves graph, the smiley face, please? It would move our purple line up closer to our reserves and start that motion. That would essentially change the slope of that curve to bring us more quickly above reserves and into a stronger capital position. So the point of intersection between the purple line and the blue shaded area would happen sooner.
And if we do number 2, we're just kicking the can down the road.
Right.
Like you're saying. And if we do 1, that's
with good cool stuff.
Well, the last time the first year, we went 6%.
Yes.
And the second year, we went 5%, and then we dropped down to 3%. So we did have the front load on the front.
We did. The difficulty is that the 3 didn't keep up with and didn't start to build sufficient reserves to get you into.
It should have been another 6 or 5.
We should have had something else, but there were other concerns for the district at the time, and you were...
Well, we had a bad economy.
Exactly. You were coming out of a bad economy, you were in a drought, there was mandatory conservation happening to you, so, that's when you're making the reserve drawdown and you're protecting the community. That makes complete sense. I think at this time, COVID is an impact, and that is very real. We're seeing performance in that space, but not a resounding cry. We are behind, and to President Bender's point, we're talking $3, $5 in that range. Not that that's a de minimis amount, but it is.
Well, what's our average electric bill in the district? I mean, I don't expect Brian, but in comparison to the average water bill.
I don't have that one off the top of my head, Bob, I'm sorry.
Mike's not here.
But I can get that for you if that's something.
But
you
I'm
want.
just saying, I think, you know, I think the average water bill is, I mean, compared to the other water districts, we're
John,
not
will you
the
put up the
highest right
comparison?
now.
comparative, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
compared to
that's
the water
actually a
districts,
really
well,
good, well, that just tells us where we're at in the rest of the large community.
Who has the highest water rate there? I can't see it.
Squaw Valley.
Squaw Valley.
But we're now Olympic Valley. So Olympic,
So right now, we're lower, we're right in the middle, right?
Yeah, they wanted our water.
like the second lowest,
We're probably at the average.
right?
Okay.
So the gray bar compared to South Tahoe PUD, right? And those guys are water and sewer.
They're not nearly as hilly as we are.
And they have other sources. So they're able to stop.
And everybody on this list for the other districts also has planned rate adjustments, at least for the next year or two at the minimum.
So what you're saying is these are the current values.
That is correct. That's the fiscal year 21 rates.
So we're not, yeah. So even when we hit, they're gonna increase so is it correct to say, Sean, that after we do ours, they're gonna do theirs and their numbers are gonna move up again? So if we're running middle of the pack in terms of our increase now, we will be below middle of the pack when we move forward. So, then I guess the question for the board at this moment is if we're asking staff to do between scenario 2 and scenario 3, how do we gauge that? Do you want to have staff?
I'd say front-loaded like scenario 3,
Okay,
but maybe not at 15%. Well, I'd like to talk to the dollar figures.
yeah.
You know, maybe less than $9, but then not the, or whatever, I keep
Sean,
going
we
to
go back to
9.
the dollars, please?
You know, Jeff, maybe we should just do it like 10% to 10, 9, 8, 7, something like that.
Mhm.
Percentage each year.
And like we did
Oh, stack it.
5 years ago, we can do a 5-year 218 process and
Yeah.
just give us a maximum. Okay, we can do rate increases up to,
But instead of starting at
10%.
15%,
yeah,
I think right now it would be difficult or problematic to go to a double digit. Right, I think that there's a certain insensitivity in that space, so, and I want to look at the numbers first, but I think my recommendation would be in line with Director Ellis, and that's, let's see where the pressure is in years 1 and 2, see if we can build up some momentum, and then carry that momentum in years 3, 4, and 5.
yeah, but I do agree that, you know, all we're doing is, it's like we're putting a Band-Aid on the system the last 8 or 10 years. We're putting a Band-Aid on the system, and we're really not addressing, and then we ran into additional expenses, you know, with the tanks and things like that we weren't expecting.
right.
You know, now, is that right, Brian?
Yeah, there was some additional cost there with the Red Mountain.
Yeah.
So do we take these 5 years to build the momentum to get us to full reserves and $7 million annually in year 6?
Depends on what that dollar.
Yeah, I don't think we could achieve the results of scenario 3.
No.
And I don't think we should have our ratepayers pay for that. But on the other hand, I agree with Tony and Krista and Jeff that we got to be somewhere between. Do you guys agree with that?
I do. I mean,
I do
like
too.
7% looks like.
I mean, the last thing I want to do is raise rates, but
for staff's direction, would the board prefer another 3 scenarios in between those, or 2 scenarios? Or just so we can make sure the presentation is.
Let's do 3 scenarios, because that way, more information is better, right? Because I can see us parsing it every single time. Well, let's try this.
What we did do, we did it, I think, live 5 years ago, just with that Excel spreadsheet. And then we can just play with it. You know, what does the 10% look like in fiscal year 2021, or 8% 21, 10% 22, and then somewhere between 8 and 12, or I don't know, what was the scenario
Yeah, but
3?
you know, we have to see that dollar number, because when we see the
It
dollar
was
number.
15 in year
we
1 and
scream.
2.
Right.
But then it tapered off a lot in year 3, 4, and 5.
Joe, we can open the model here for you.
Yeah.
And work the numbers with you
Yeah.
live.
I think you should probably start around 9%,
For 21.
and then gradually reduce that.
Mhm.
I mean, does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, as long as we keep that percentage up for the first 3 years, 4 years.
Scenario 3, I believe, was 15, 15, 6, 6, 6.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think what might you,
Oh, 6, 4, 4.
So, yeah, 15, 15, 6, 4, 4.
or maybe you just go 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, or something like that.
Yeah.
So we'll build that into the model as your starting point, so that you can see that, and if that's comfortable, then we'll just move forward. If not, we'll work live from that spot as our starting place, and we'll make sure that we have not only this graph, the graph showing a comparative graph, but we'll also have the dollar increases over, every time we change the number, all of those 3 boxes will change.
And so scenario 3 shows us at the 7 million cap next year.
72 million over 10 years.
So it's running rate funded capital at 7 million in 2024. So we pick up speed. So it starts at 6.7 million, 6.8, 6.9, and 7. So you're 100,000 off as you're building towards to get, but for all intents and purposes, you're in it to win it right off the gate.
Okay, the other question is, can your staff handle working with improvements of $7 million a year? I mean, are you gonna be overstressed by trying to manage that many projects?
That's a great question. And so part of that capital improvement plan is leveraging, outside consulting services, construction services, managing that through the next 10 years.
Ram?
Yeah. So so he's correct. What concerns me most, Bob, is getting the construction entities into our space. Right?
And then the other thing to consider is all these contractors, every year that we delay it, they're getting more and more expensive too.
Right.
Oh, they are.
Things,
It's like,
What-
okay,
materials and labor
pay
is
it now,
now
you want to pay it later.
cheaper.
Well,
It's not gonna be-
as you know, now dollars or near-term dollars are cheaper than future dollars. That's always true. Right? So.
But master plans should have a component in them that in the out years, there are adjustments so that you're chasing that type of inflation. So while, yes, you don't know exactly where construction costs will be, most good master plans have some fairly conservative contingencies built into them for planning that far into the future. So it should be part of that. I don't recall, Bobby bring up a good point about staffing. I don't recall, how much of the master plan, talked about that, if it did at all, but part of this rate increase will be to also fund the horsepower to do these projects. So that's part of the big picture.
Yeah, they included in the master plan were some costs or expenses addressing engineering design, things of those natures.
Yeah, I just feel like that, just that scenario 2 blue bar, or just the end result, it needs to be higher. And even up to halfway to the purple line, even, to that point. I guess that's in the $4 to $5 million range.
Hey, Brian, I don't remember the exact details of this Far West study. I do remember that monster number of 72 million. But at the end of that 10 years, and we've done all this work with the $72 million worth of investment, where are we going to be after then? I mean, are we going to have to continue to spend that kind of money, or are those pipes going to be good for 40 years or 50 years from now?
Great question. So the master plan is based on a needs assessment within the district and the life cycle of infrastructure. So it's addressing infrastructure that's approaching the end of its life cycle. It's not addressing every piece of infrastructure across the district. It's addressing those pieces of infrastructure, tanks, pump stations, pipelines, control valves that the district staff knows is approaching. For example, if a subdivision was built in 1970, we know that was 40 some odd years ago. There's assets within that group that are approaching to the end of their life cycle. This CIP addresses that, and a CIP is a plan that will be reevaluated as we move forward.
Okay, but in year 11, are improvements going to go to $3 million then?
I imagine they're gonna stay up.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so in reviewing the plan, Director Ellis, there is a certain amount of catch-up, because there are assets that have outlived their useful life. And then the plan takes on those plus those that are gonna run their term during the 10-year cycle.
Right.
So I don't anticipate a dip per se, but
Is there going to be a need to continue to spend $7 million a year on repairs?
Most likely.
Yeah, so right now, the total net assets of the district, so if you look at our net value, we're at $411 million. And that's just our asset value. That isn't the replacement cost. In this scenario, we're not even putting 1% of the net present value of the district back into its capital, right? Once we're at 7, we're putting in just less than 2% back into our net present value. That's pretty low. Is it doable? Bar West is telling us that this plan will begin to renew and update our capital, our value, or our infrastructure so that it is serviceable. There will always be capital, whether it's $7 million or something less than or something more than, I can't say. We'll be looking at that with so one of the things that we've started, the initiative, is to develop our CMMS, the computerized maintenance and monitoring system. This will inform our CIP for the future in terms of collecting those assets that are failing, collecting those assets that are aging out, ensuring that the maintenance is being done on them appropriately, so that we do know when they're going to age out. So I know that doesn't necessarily address the question in that, will the number go down, will the number go up, or will it stay the same? I think it's safe to say that the number will be very close to 7 million if we do a good job. If we don't do a good job, it's going to go above 7 million. If we do something better, maybe we can get it down based on efficiency.
I just want to add to that, Ram, as well, that, we're talking about projects that aren't necessarily completely related to, end of useful life. We're also talking about projects that are trying to bring the system up to a reliability and redundancy and fire storage capacity, things that are modern needs that weren't necessarily at the forefront of the design engineers 40, 50 years ago, that now have come to become real social issues in our region. So we're not only addressing, the life cycle of some of this stuff, we're just addressing the design life cycle of some of this infrastructure. So we'll argue that a lot of the work that's in this master plan is addressing that that side of capital improvements, not necessarily just leaky pipes and things that have run their course for useful life. So I tend to agree with Rem that there will always be $7 million worth of capital projects to spend. My belief is on a variety of projects, not just end of life cycle. So I don't think you'll see a dip. I think you'll see that number stay steady or possibly grow in the future.
That's a perfect point. Thank you, Director Lolio.
This plan will raise $9. What's the percentage on that?
Well, let's just, where was that? The scenario 3 was actually which was 15%, $11.
Yeah.
So at this point, we're talking closer to scenario 3 than to, $7 or $8 a month. We're probably talking for the average bill.
Yeah. That doesn't sound so bad. But we
Right.
will get us out of the hole, as we go.
Well,
Or how many years shall we charge that? Charge 3 years on that?
well, so the maximum we can go is 5, but I think at this point,
5 years.
I think let's charge staff with, we'll start the first scenario at 9, we'll levelize, we'll try it, and we'll build our reserves and get that capital program up as strongly as we can. We'll bring that in to the board, and the board can then, in real time, work with those percentages, and we will have a report out on the dollars of increase, and we'll be able to show you how that works. And so that'll give you guys a couple of the knobs and levers to work with to get to a place where the board's comfortable.
And so we can come out too.
Yeah.
That we can build.
Yeah, if we gotta dig ourselves out of the mountain of snow.
Yeah. Not get very much.
Apparently we've gotta buy a Honda, that's what everybody keeps telling me, gotta buy a Honda.
Oh, it's snow blower.
Snow blower.
938.
Most common number up there.
I'll tell you one thing, the contractors is the only thing that went up.
Yeah.
Those Hondas went up.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if there's not any other further discussion or questions, Sean can continue on with the rate component. Or sorry, cost of service.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So we'll all work with Brian and others, and we'll get that together. And when we come back next time, what we'll do is we have the cost of service set up. It's ready to go. But again, with the unknown on the capital plan, I haven't completed it all the way because we may need to come back and look at how costs shift and how we go through that process. So next time that will be much more fine-tuned. And really what a cost of service is remember splitting that pie into equitable and proportional components for each of the customer classes. So residential versus non-residential. And it's accepted as fair and equitable, and it really tells us if there's any subsidies between our customer classes of service. So are their current rates and the revenues that result from those rates equal to the proportionally distributed costs? That's what we get back to on Proposition 218, so that we can say that costs are proportional and equitable. And that's really what the cost of service does. It meets that intent of Prop 218. And it gives us our unit cost. So as we go through this, the cost of service is going to demonstrate the cost basis for each customer class and each component of the rate structure. So for that meter and consumption charge, this cost of service is going to say we need to charge X for that meter and Y for that consumption charge based on how each customer class utilizes the system. So with recent legal decisions and water rate challenges over the last couple of years, this approach really limits our ability to phase in any adjustments. That's why I referenced this first year of cost of service is always a reset year where we get back to our cost of service results, and then we adjust from there over the next 4 years as we go through this. I'm not expecting any major shifts in the cost of service. We're using the same methodology as we always have. But we did, last rate study, we did have a little more ability to phase in some of the adjustments. So this will really get us back on track, as all rate studies do, depending on how many years are between. The district's been good on doing these frequently, so I don't see any large issues coming out of this. But we'll have that ready to go the next time as well. We'll be able to show you, are there any changes in addition to the overall size of the pie changing? So rates are going up X percent on the average customer bill. Do we also need to adjust for cost of service? And then finally, based on that, we'll be able to design the rates. And really the rate design reflects the overall results of the revenue requirement and cost of service, as well as the district's and the board's goals and objectives for those rate structures. So what do we want to be telling your customers with the rate structure and those bills that they ultimately see as part of that? And going through this process then ultimately results in cost-based, equitable, and proportional rates. So here are your rates today. On the left-hand side on the top is our residential. We've got our monthly meter charge for a 5/8 by 3/4 and a 3/4. Those are the same rate. That was a policy we made during previous rate studies. And then the 1 inch, which increases based on the capacity of those meter sizes. So as larger meter, larger potential demand, larger actual demand, which drives the change in that meter size. The consumption charge for your residential customers is a block or a tier rate structure, where the first tier is 0 to 8,000 gallons at 78 cents per thousand, and 8,000 gallons and up is 97 cents per thousand. So that goes back to our discussion the prior 2 rate study cycles, where we've essentially targeted roughly 80% of the revenues coming through the fixed charges. So that's pretty comparable to many of your other peers in the Tahoe Basin and how we're looking at that. Going to the right-hand side for commercial, same approach for the meter charge. We have larger meters, so we bring that out to the larger meter sizes for those customers. And then on the consumption charge, it's a uniform rate or the same rate for each 1,000 gallons. That is a contemporary approach, and the difference between residential and commercial is primarily we have a much more homogeneous customer class in residential. We know when folks use water, when they don't, and how they use it. Commercial can vary. So thinking of a restaurant, thinking of a convenience store versus some of the other businesses in the area, a commercial rate structure is the general approach. Then we also have the zone charge. So the pumping charge as you go up into the different pressure zones, and that again will be updated as part of this too if there's changes in those costs. So finally, a summary of the rate design. We'll come back and as we go through and fine tune and finalize that revenue requirement, the overall percentage change, then we'll roll that into the cost of service to come back to our unit costs for the meter charge and consumption charge. And really here, I just wanted to see if there are any questions or comments about the current rate structure that we just walked through. If not, we would maintain that current rate structure and move that forward. That's reflected the prior board direction in the prior studies as part of that. And then we'll look at, as we mentioned, up to a 5-year period with a January 2021 implementation. So the next steps here, we got some direction on the capital plan. We'll work through that and bring that back to you all to look at. Hopefully we hit the nail on the head. If not, we'll work through that and develop the scenario that meets your needs. We'll then finalize that cost of service and rate design. We'll give you the results and recommendations. And then if the board approves, then staff and we will help with that Proposition 218 process, which is really sending a customer notification, setting the public hearing date, and holding that public hearing. And then if there is no majority protest, so less than 50% of your customers don't protest, then the board can adopt those rates, and then those rates would be adopted in January 21. And with that, I'll take any comments or questions that you may have on cost of service or rate design, if there's anything you would like for us to consider as we go through that process.
I think what you said was, and what Rem said, but we get back that information. Perfect.
Brent, do you have any thoughts on the rate structure? You know, our current, you know, what we just looked at, the existing one.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggested changes to that?
No, I think that I was comfortable bringing the three scenarios so that we could get a feel for where you guys were in terms of tolerance and thought. And I really appreciate everybody's candid conversation here this evening. I think that we'll start with a 9. We'll figure out what the tiering is, and we'll bring back to you. I think what I will catalog as a staff recommendation, and then we'll build from that. Because tonight, I would clearly say you didn't see a staff recommendation per se. You saw the upper limit, which is what the capital program was, kind of a middle band tolerance, and then kind of a status quo. So.
And then, well, my specific thought was on the, you know, we've got the base charge, the consumption charge.
Yeah.
You know, the commercial consumption is pretty high. The commercial base and residential essentially just mirror each other until the larger meters.
Right.
And the residential consumption charge is, you know, not, you know, very less, much less than the commercial. So,
I do have some questions about, I missed Ms. Korn covered what the percentage of what percentage is the meter fee and what percentage is the consumption fee, and I missed that number, like you said it, and I was like,
John, could you bring up that breakdown of the rate structure, the current one on your slide, that last sheet?
Most of the people are in the base of consumption, because it's so high, so just keep that in mind.
yeah,
you know,
yes,
For residential, I mean.
yes.
right. And we did that because there's so many second homes up here. It's just like they've got to help pay for it.
That's what that is, because, you know, in general, I would,
The
I think.
system.
Sorry, that's shedding some light on why we're structured the way we are. Because I think in general, I would support a lower fixed fee and more tiers on the consumption side and reward people for conserving and also reward people who simply don't have a lot of money and they don't consume a lot, you know, they don't have lots that they're watering, for example. But yeah, that whole second.
But that penalizes the full-time, that penalizes all of us who
Right.
live here and pay the rate and who live here full-time when we decrease that rate. Or the baseline.
Yeah.
Penalizes.
Keeping the fixed fee, it normalizes revenue. So it helps,
For sure.
it helps combat the ebb and
Yes.
flow of variable consumption, which we do experience given
Also our seasonality.
the seasonality of the district.
Right.
Yeah.
And everyone wants the water to flow when you turn on that faucet, regardless of
Yeah.
how
you know,
often you're living in that house.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure, and I'm sure we have been making sure of this, that we protect any ratepayers that we have that are on the very low end of things, as well as encouraging conservation. And I don't think, I don't want us to solve a problem we don't actually have. If there is no customer class that is really crying out for attention for aid, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I do want us to keep that in the forefront of our minds when we're creating our rate structures. If any tweaks that we make, I want to make sure that those people are protected. And I also want to make sure that we are still continuing to encourage conservation, no matter, this is California, we are going to be in the middle of another crazy drought at any moment. It could be now, we just don't know quite yet. So that's what I just would want us to keep in the forefront of our minds as we look at the different structures that we could have. And I know we talked at one point about time of use for water rates as well as electric rates. I know that came up in a conversation. And the research that I did on that told me that it may not, you also, again, have to keep those low-end customers in mind because they're the ones that are least able to respond to a time of use proposition. If they're working, they can't change what time they take a shower, et cetera, whatever. So just all of those things are things that I would want to keep in the forefront of our minds as we make any tweaks to these numbers. So that's what I want to accomplish with our adjustments if we need to do any. Seasonal rates, there's another thing. We do have a seasonal, so we use seasonal rates. We charge more in the summer.
Unfortunately, Prop 218 puts really wicked sideboards on a lot of what we can do. Right?
Okay.
We always have to show proportionality. We always have to show that it's service the customer is getting, and we can't take from one customer and give to the other. That's the bummer of 218.
Yeah, it's interesting, fair and equitable.
Yeah, not always equitable, definitely not always.
Yeah, it doesn't, there's that little picture in elementary school, you've got fair, and they're all standing on a box, and the tall kids way up there, and the little kids can't see over the fence. And then you've got fair, that's box, so that everybody can see over the fence, but it's not equal.
And we talked about, doing the encouraging water consumption or encouraging water conservation. And it just, just trying to get the rate study to work up here with all the second homes.
Yeah, the second homes are a real, that might be changing. We might
Right.
have more people in those second homes full time. That seems to be a pattern that we're noticing this summer. So if we're lucky.
Well, it's already changed. I mean, and it started 20 years ago when everyone started putting in irrigation systems up here. So, that shift has already occurred. The concept that, we're all talking about conservation is an important thing. I mean, we've dodged it successfully up here with the state because, we can't fit their model, which way they want 25% of the rates to come from the fixed scenario and 75 to come from consumption to promote conservation. But with the discussion tonight, which is exactly correct, you can't do that with our demographics. But you can encourage conservation by, making sure that elective water use, might have a higher premium. That's what tiers are. That's one of the reasons tiers exist, is to distinguish basic water use from elective water use and generate a difference if you can justify it through 218, as Sean will shake his head, through tiers, that you can promote some type of conservation by making elective water use a little bit more expensive.
So building some nuance into our tiers may something we can do, or maybe not. I don't know what.
No, you can. I think that, we want to make sure that like our conservation program and stuff like that, that is exclusively loaded into tier 2. If we're required to start additional pumping expense, because of overusage, we want to make sure that's in tier 2, right? Because in those spaces, our tier 1 customers, our baseline customers, and this is to Tony's point, it is completely elective for them to move into tier 2, right? There are people in our communities that they're going to spend the money. They want to have a garden, they want to have whatever it is, and they're willing to make that expenditure. Okay, well then they're gonna pay for the incremental cost that it costs the base system to increase to deliver the service. And so we have that, and then the conservation programs. And so, if you want to cause more price elasticity, we increase our conservation programs so that it increases the price in tier 2.
Okay.
And maybe that's a result of this discussion tonight, too.
And that's why we moved on
To do an increase on the tier 2. A little more stiffer than our overall.
Okay.
So I have a few more slides for you, just to cap this off, give you a little more,
Really?
Yeah, really? You have 2 minutes.
We didn't know that.
No, I just wanted to kind of present visually a timeline, what we're looking at to make sure we're in compliance with the 218 process. So this evening, September 2nd, we had the first workshop here to review the study. Staff will come back on October 7th. We have some feedback and direction on the next presentation. We'll review a proposed rate structure with a plan to approve a rate setting and schedule a public hearing. In October and November, the district will advertise the scheduled public hearing in compliance with Prop 218 requirements. That would lead to a December 2nd public hearing where there would be an opportunity for any protest or discussion and adopting of an ordinance setting the new water utility rates for the subsequent years. The rates would become effective for the first billing after January 1st, 2021. There's a typo there. And we move on from there.
Okay.
There is, like I mentioned, no direct fiscal impact with this workshop this evening, but the feedback and direction staff has received will be utilized in the subsequent steps here. And the recommendation this evening was to provide input and direction moving forward. And thank you for your time. And if there's any other questions, I can answer them now.
Shannon, did we get any public input on any of this?
Absolutely.
We did.
No, I'm sorry. No, we did not receive any public.
Oh, okay,
I thought
wow.
he asked me, do we call for it? And I was like, yeah.
Okay.
I actually do have one more quick question.
Sure.
Do you know who our biggest commercial customer is? And I ask this because the financial presentation that we
Yeah, it's
got.
done. Oh, wait, water, water user.
The school district would be one because of the irrigation. So our large consumption is irrigation based. So
Because I saw that our largest consumer consumes 25% of our water and pays 4%. So that jumped out at me on that financial presentation that we were given last meeting. So that's what I was playing on. And I meant to ask that at that time, but it was just moving along really quick.
Hospital?
So it could be the hospital. That's what it occurred to me that it was the hospital. But I don't know.
All those sponge baths.
My dad does, man. I'll find that specific thing. I'll shoot you an email.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to know it on the top at 10 o'clock at night. I'm sorry.
I'd like to take an opportunity to thank Mr. Korn for joining us and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good seeing you again. Appreciate it.
So we have some routine business. Yeah, we're almost there. Approval of the treasurer's report of fund balances for the month ended June 30, 2020.
So moved.
So moved. Bob seconded. Sean, a roll call?
Thank you. Director Laliotis.
Yes.
Yes.
Director Aguirre?
Yes.
Vice President Fenn?
Yes.
President Bender?
Yes.
And for the record, there are no public comments.
Thank you. No public comments on this one. And Joe, can we pay the bills?
Hey, move to pay the bill.
Thank you.
Second.
Second, any public comment?
No, sir.
Roll call, please.
Director Lalietta?
Yep.
Yes.
Director Aguirre?
Yes.
Vice President Fenn?
Yes.
President Bender?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have some meeting minutes in here.
Yes, sir.
August 5th.
I move to approve the minutes of August 5th, 2020.
I'll second that.
Roll call?
Oh, wait, I did see Joe, or on the roll call on the minutes, Joe has been there twice.
What was that?
Correct that before.
That was my one little, thank you.
Director Lalietta?
Yes.
Director Ellis?
Yes.
Director Aguirre?
Yes.
Vice President Fenn?
Yes.
President Bender?
Yes.
So what happened to Joe in the minute?
You are in the minutes twice. You were present twice.
Well,
You
I
were
was.
here and you
I
were
was
here.
here twice then.
We were getting an echo.
Thinking up for one of
That
us.
was what it was.
Roll with me.
Everyone ready for adjournment?
Hey, the
Yeah.
move's good. How's that?
All right. Thank you. Do we need to?
There we go.
Yeah, we don't, Steve Gross always would tell me, we don't need a roll call vote for adjournment.
We do not.
He was saying this.
You do not. Good night, everybody. Great discussions.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Good night. Good night.